Very welcome to this morning's meeting. In the room with me today I have Anya Murphy, I have the Vice Chair Kelly Armstrong, I have Andy Allen and I have Paul Frew. And then on Starleaf we have Stephen Dunn, Ciara Ferguson, Aisling Riley and Mark Durkin. So can I first of all excuse me, ask members if they any matters they declaration of interest actually was the words I'm trying to get out. Okay, Andy?
Yeah, Charity Trustee, Chair and Private Sector Landlord.
Paul?
Owner of a rented property.
And Stephen?
Yes, just about the landlord as well. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, that's all that out of the way. Then can we move on to agenda item... I'm back to front here. I'm going straight to 4. This is not where we are. True, it's the other page. Right, and I see we're starting off well this morning, so we are. So, agenda item 1 is apologies. Everybody's present, so that's fine. And I understand Andy needs to leave for a short time. Agenda item 2, draft minutes. You'll find draft minutes of the meeting of the 25th of November 2021 at page 6. Are members content to agree the minutes as drafted?
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you. Okay, moving on then to agenda item 3, which is chairperson's business. Members, you will have heard in the Chamber on Tuesday that the Minister is planning a review of the entire Caravans Act. A 12-week consultation is planned to be launched before Christmas, before the end, well, will be Christmas before the end of the year. I know previously we have always had the mantra of we only deal with queries around people whose main home is a caravan and not all of the other aspects to it, but I believe there was a legal judgment was passed to say that communities had to look at the Caravans Act in its entirety. So that will be a wee bit of work ahead for us on that. So I can imagine that we're going to be now inundated from the many caravan owners out there with issues. So just to make members aware of that. Any comments you want to make on that? Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, Chair, if we could write to the Department just to see if there's a timeline and how what the Minister intends this to proceed by. How long is the consultation going to be and where does she expect to be? Is there anything going to be achieved before the end of the mandate?
Yeah, I think we need that, absolutely. Kelly?
I was just going to say, Chair, I appreciate that the legal decision has been taken and we have it to go through. But economy has had quite a lot of input to caravans over the years. It is something that falls between two stools. It may well be through this process we have to factor in some sort of link up with the Economy Committee on this, because as small businesses, actually large businesses in some cases, there will be information that they will hold. I think we need to maybe write to the Economy Committee to say at some stage we will need to link in with them to ensure that we can scrutinise properly.
No, I think that's also an excellent point as well. I just would be quite concerned of our workload that we have ahead and how this is going to fit in with our workload after Christmas recess, because I know we're going to be extremely busy. And as I go on, you'll find out even more why we're going to be extremely busy.
Chair, could I just check on the timeline on this, because I don't know whether we will be able to get this through in this mandate before the pre-election period. Obviously the bill has to be laid. First, second stage comes to committee. I genuinely don't know how we as a committee, knowing what we're going through, would have. It's not that we wouldn't have the capacity or the ability to do it. I just think now, depending when the Minister is going to bring forward that bill, there physically may not just be enough weeks left.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And I think we as a committee have been very realistic with our planning and the bills and the work that we have to do. So I think that we need to have those honest conversations need to take place between ourselves and the department as to what their expectations are and actually what we can achieve. Andy?
Yeah, no, I think that's why it'd be good to get clarification from them as to what they foresee the process being. If the Minister's going to launch a consultation before Christmas, surely she's not going to bring forward any type of legislation or bill before that.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
go ahead, Paul.
I would agree with that. It has to be a dose of reality here. Whatever the court ruling and judgment was, it'll still be the court ruling and judgment after into the new term. And whilst it's good and proper that the department will consult, usually in most things they take a period of time to consult and then they take an even longer period of time to review the consultation. So, again, I don't see even any laying of a bill this term, to be honest with you. But if the department come back and say something different, then that's all well and good. We'll still have to do our processes, and we'll still have to take our due diligence and care and the time to look at any bill they produce. I just don't see it happening.
No, I don't either. But look, we'll ask them for the details and their timeline. And again, it's having that openness and honesty between the department and ourselves is very important, especially at the end of a mandate as to capacity.
Chair,
Sorry,
could
go
I
ahead.
just say, sorry, just a message from the DALO, just to confirm it is a review at this point and no indication of a bill?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it is a review. But even a review is something, given the amount of, we certainly know as MLAs through last year, the amount of emails in our inbox from caravan owners and the implications that last year brought for them. And we know also that there was a petition laid in the Assembly on Monday around all of these issues. So I'm happy we move on from that, and we'll just wait and see for the detail to come through from the department, yes? Yeah? All right.
Sure, I probably should have declared an interest as a caravan owner and respect that as well. So.
I know, the declaration of interest is getting longer and longer. I know, okay. All right, members, I just also want to advise that we were due to be briefed by the department at today's meeting on fuel poverty payments. The officials requested a postponement until next week, as they are attending a meeting this week specific to this issue, and will be able to give a fuller briefing at next week's meeting to update members. Members, I know that we're really very keen to get that update, and it is something that's very topical. It's something that is very needed right now. But if it means we get a more fuller update, and maybe actually not an update but actions is what we want. We don't want an update, we want actions. So that I'm happy enough with that. All right, we'll move on. Yeah? Okay. Just want to remind you that the accelerated motion on the second stage debate on the Social Security Terminal Illness Bill is next Tuesday, the 7th of December, and the deadline for members' proposed amendments then will be 9:30 on Wednesday, the 8th of December. Also, members, a young person's Zoom event on the bedding bill will be held on Wednesday, the 15th December at 7 p.m. So we'll send that out to you. But could you let the committee team know if you're available to attend the event and listen in to that? I don't know what I've done with my pages this morning, all back to front. For views of the young people, I mean, that was really successful when we did it with the young people for the licensing bill that we had. So, albeit it might not, there's a lot of it will not apply to them, but I think they really give us some ideas that we hadn't thought of whenever we were looking at that. So I think that should be good. So if any members are available, even if it's just to come in and out for a short time, that's perfectly grand too. So it's the 15th of December at 7 p.m. All right, members, I'm going to move on to agenda item 4, which is matters arising. Members, if you then turn to page 17, you'll see a departmental response in relation to changing places. The accessibility of the facilities will be determined by the opening hours of the venues. However, the majority are located in leisure centres and open spaces such as public parks, all of which are open to the public from early morning to late in the evening, and in some cases 24 hours. A full list of opening hours of those venues supported through the programme is provided. Any comments? Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, Chair, it's just back to the point that we had previously raised in relation to the piece of work that the Finance Minister has taken forward in relation to the building regulations. He had previously said that he would be supportive of a bid for a dedicated fund, and we had been conversing with communities on that, just to see if we could write again to the Minister to see if she's included anything of that scale within the budget exercise.
Okay. Yep, we can ask that. Anne Kelly.
Chair, there is an issue with this, and it comes under our remit because it doesn't include councils. Very recently, I was made aware there is a fantastic new facility, leisure facility, has been opened in Belfast. I'm not going to name it, but I think we can all guess what that one is. And it doesn't have a changing places toilet in it. And this comes back to Andy's point about the building regulations. Now, it's not that council's issue because they did what they needed to do within the current building regulations, but I was led to believe that those building regulations were updated, and I believe they're not updated so far. But that delay means that we have councils that are going out there and doing what they need to do within the current remit, but that's falling behind what the intention is for changing places toilets. So we're having leisure centres. I know that the correspondence back says that these changing places toilets will be in leisure centres. No, they're not, because there's brand new ones being built and they're not being included within it. So is there something we could go back to the Minister and ask her to do a review of council facilities to actually pinpoint where the changing places toilets are and where there are gaps? Is there any strategic direction that's being used to ensure that NILGA or Solus or whoever it is can make application for this fund?
Yeah, no, we can ask those. I mean, that comes back again to, and we've seen it in our bills where you've got minimum standards, and government bodies will apply minimum standards when we actually want them to apply the very best standards they can for all of their ratepayers within their areas, and they're obviously not doing that. So I think they're all good points, Andy.
Yeah, it might be worth in that context writing to finance and asking them for an update on where they are with the building regs. I think the consultation closed not that long ago, so hopefully they're in a position to bring some stuff forward in the new year. And also, further to that, on Callie's point in relation to council facilities, could we also write to the councils or through Solus to find out how many councils delivered new facilities and how many of those included changing places?
Yep, I think that's absolutely spot on to do that. Okay, folks, can we move on from that? Yeah, all right. Okay, members, can you turn to page 21 where you'll see a departmental response in relation to the COVID-19 heating payment. Members, we had asked for the number of applicants who had received a payment under the scheme following an appeal after previously being unsuccessful in their application. As of the end of September 2021, a payment of £200 had been made to 575 individuals following a successful appeal relating to one of the qualifying benefits. So again, members, any comments or content to note? Content to note?
Content to note, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'll then ask you to turn to page 22 where you'll see another departmental response, this time in relation to the Shared Prosperity Fund. It says until the full details of SPF are known, including information on funding priorities and on which organisations might be eligible to apply, it is not possible to determine what the potential social impacts might be if funding is not secured by local organisations currently in receipt of EU funding. Members, again, any comments or content to note this? I mean, I know that the work is being done. I know the Finance Minister has worked very hard on this with his colleagues at Westminster, or with Westminster Government. So I mean, I think this is just a waiting game for us, albeit it's one we need to keep a watchful eye on. Are members content with that? Yeah, we'll move on. Okay. Yeah. Then can we move on to page 23 where you'll see a response from the NI Federation of Housing Associations. The response is in relation to the ban on domestic boilers. The Federation is unaware of any plan to ban boilers in new built homes in Northern Ireland from 2025, where there is a proposal in England to do this. As yet, they don't believe it extends to Northern Ireland. One way to assist the sector would be for the Northern Ireland Barnett share of the proposed £3.8 billion Westminster Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund to be ring-fenced to help deliver on the transition of the sector to a low-carbon future. Members, any comments on this? Kelly?
Okay, this has me a bit confused. So if in England they're bringing forward this change, why is it not extending to Northern Ireland? And the other thing is, if there's any Barnett consequentials, the fact that we're not planning to do it in Northern Ireland, does that cut us out of any potential Barnett consequentials? We know here that we're hoping that gas boilers can be used for an alternative fuel source in the future, and there's research going on, as we know, in the background about that. So the gas system can be used. So removing those boilers seems a bit nonsensical to me, but why is Northern Ireland being left out of this? What do we not know? What's missing there? So I think we need to find out a wee bit more on this. Who we ask, I don't know. Is this infrastructure, economy? Is it our own minister and to do with housing? I think as a committee we need to write to others and just seek clarification. Northern Ireland's not.
It could be agriculture as well, because of the climate and stuff too.
Exactly.
And I know even the new heat pumps require an oil boiler as backup as well. So I don't know how that works either when you have to have an oil
I think
we
we've
have to have a backup of an oil boiler.
Yeah, I think we've picked at a scab here, and I think we do as a committee just need to pick it a little bit more just to make sure that Northern Ireland is not going to be left behind, and we're not left in a situation in 2 or 3 years' time when it comes back and says, well, you didn't do anything about this. I think we do need to consider that. I know Northern Ireland is and has the opportunity to do something with hydrogen. Might be quite a while down the road, and in the meantime we have, you know, our peers across in England having these boilers removed. Is there something we're missing out here?
Yeah, it's all rather strange when we're continuing to do boiler replacement schemes and everything else, and other parts of the UK are trying to eradicate fossil fuels. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that what's proposed in England, and I'm not sure it will come in, but what's proposed in England is a ban on boilers in new builds. Which means then you will still get boilers for at least the next 70 years or longer, depending on the housing stock, unless there's another change in policy or a step change. We are different from GB in the fact that even our mix is different.
Yeah.
And the availability of gas is not afforded to everyone in this country. Even when there is gas in 10 towns system, it's more than 10 towns now. I know of one example whereby the gas pipeline goes by a house, goes by a dwelling about 12 metres away from its threshold, and they still can't avail of gas because the company will not connect, will not go travel that 12 metres to lay a pipeline into their front door. Now, in other areas, they have done it down longer drives. So it's really peculiar, and it's all about the business model. Belfast is slightly different, of course. That's a different model, and it was more domesticated in Belfast than it was for 10 towns, because the 10 town system was all about going to business, and then if you happened to be on that route, you were able to avail of gas. So there's massive differences between GB and Northern Ireland with regards to the availability of fuel to heat homes, and of course the mix itself for energy. So I really wouldn't want to be imposing some arbitrary ban on new builds. But I think as technology evolves, that allows the agility for housing associations and for private enterprise to build new homes with new technology. And I think that's where we'd really need to be. I'll leave it at that.
If I come in on that, Chair, my issue is, but Paul, is about what are we doing with retrofitting? And we have, I have a question that's come back, thankfully, from the committee, or from, sorry, the Minister, to say that there's over 66,500 housing executive houses are more than 40 years old. So we're not going to knock all them down and rebuild, but we're going to have to put new systems into those. So while it's not a new home, it's a new system, and that's where, if over across the water they're doing this ban, and it's for new homes, what happens with the retrofit, which is basically putting in a whole new system into those houses? And it's something I think we just need to be aware of and tease out. Not something that may be rectified in this mandate, but I think it's just something for this committee and moving forward to the next committee that we have to be aware of. Why, I know there's a difference, but why is the difference happening? Are we missing out on money here that we could be using for retrofitting? Yeah, we need to make sure that we're not missing a trick.
No, I get that, and we can ask certainly those questions. I'm happy enough with that. Members, happy do we move on? We'll ask you to turn then to page 25, where you'll see a departmental response in relation to support for mortgage interest security of loans bill. Default event. A default event is defined in the loan agreement as an event of circumstances in which the department may, following notice, stop loan payments, bring the loan agreement to an end, and at the department's discretion require repayment of the loan. This right to repayment is quite separate from repayment being triggered when the property is sold, otherwise disposed of, or in the event of a death of the owner of the property. So it was just to clear up some of the questions that had been asked around this. Are members content to note this? Given we're going to be starting actually the scrutiny of this pretty soon, then we can ask further questions on it then. Members happy with that? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, members, if you can actually turn then to page 40, where you'll see a departmental response in relation to universal credit and HC1 claim form. So a change of request has been submitted to DWP, who are the owners of the universal credit system, which will allow for easier access to the HC1 form directly from a customer's universal credit account. Regarding parents visiting an ill child in hospital, customers claiming universal credit may be able to get help with health and travel costs for themselves, their partner or the children. It is the Department of Health that will determine if travel costs can be paid. So, Andy, I think this was one of the ones that you had asking questions around. Have you anything further on that? Or
Yeah, Chair, no, it's welcome that the change on the UC system is going to come forward imminent, but I'm always sceptical of that word or that term. I suppose just what I would say is we'll obviously keep an eye on it whilst we continue to meet as a committee, but if it hasn't been resolved by the end of the mandate, if we can include it in our committee report for the next committee, just to keep an eye on it.
No, absolutely. Yeah, it's really strange now that we're saying things like, can we put that in the committee report for the end of the mandate? Yeah, weird. No, I think that's a good idea. Thanks, Andy, for that. All right, members, we're going to then move on to agenda item 5 then, which is support for mortgage interest, etc., security for loans bill. Members, you've been provided at page 42 with a draft motion to extend the committee stage of this bill until the 11th of February. Members, since the pack was issued, Claire McCanny from the Bill Office has advised the clerk that she thinks we will need all of the available time we have to consider the report on the private tenancies bill and bidding bills by the end of January, which potentially just leaves us 2 weeks for the support for mortgage interest bill, which is just 4 committee meetings. There are a number of things to consider before we agree the date on the motion. We will have completed the call for evidence by the 14th of December, and that should give the committee an understanding of what the key issues are with the bill and whether we feel we need to take any oral evidence sessions. And also, should the committee agree to report by the 11th of February, as in the current draft motion, the bill could progress its remaining stages in the remainder of the mandate. If the committee reported a week later, on the 18th of February, there is still a chance that the bill could proceed, albeit on a strict schedule with no slippage. Members, we're having a closed session with Claire later in the meeting on the private tenancies bill. So I'm just going to ask you at this stage, would you feel then that we should discuss that with Claire in our closed session rather than have a discussion about that now, and just get that advice from Claire around our workload going forward? Members happy with that? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, then I'm going to move on then to agenda item 6, which is consideration of draft committee report on the Charities bill. Okay, I'd almost forgotten about this one, that we still have to finish this one. So, members, you've been provided at page 44 with a response from the Minister for Justice in relation to the Charity Tribunal. The Minister stated that she has asked her officials to continue to liaise with their counterparts in the Department of Communities about the issues raised in relation to time limits for applying to the Charity Tribunal, and that have been identified during the passage of the Charities bill. So, members content with that?
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
I wouldn't say I'm massively content, Chair. It's a bit weak. It doesn't give any commitment to do anything other than continue to liaise, but yeah.
We are where we are. Yeah. And our own Minister has given us a commitment around that to liaise with Justice on it too. Yeah. And we certainly will have it. I know we will have it in our report on the bill. Okay, members, we're now going to consider our draft report on the Charities bill. You've been provided with a copy of the draft report in your tabled papers. So we are focusing on the text of the report only, as the team will then address any formatting issues once the text is agreed. So I will ask for comments and then agreement on each section of the report, and we'll start with powers and membership, and then ask members any comments. So we're going to go to, is that where we're starting? Powers and membership, yeah. Any comments on that, or content with that section as drafted? Content, members, with that section, powers and membership?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to move on then to executive summary and ask members, have they any comments? Are they content with this section as drafted?
Content.
Content, thank you. Going to ask you to move on then to introduction and ask members, have they any comments? Are they content with this section as drafted?
I don't have any. Content.
Content, okay. Then I'm going to ask then the committee consideration of wider issues and recommendations and ask if members any comments. Are they content with this section as drafted?
Content.
Thank you, content. Then we'll move on to committee consideration of the bill and ask members, have they any comments? Are they content with this section as drafted?
Content.
Content, okay, thank you. And then we're going to move on to committee deliberations on the bill and ask if members any comments. Are they content with this section as drafted? Content?
Content, yeah.
Thank you.
That's what we have, yeah.
Members, if I don't hear you say content, I'm taking it that you are content, other than the two voices I'm hearing. Okay, members, I'm going to move on then. Clause by clause consideration of the bill. And ask again, have members any comments, or are they content with this section as drafted?
I'm content, yeah.
Content, thank you. I'm going to move then on to appendices and ask
Sorry,
members.
Chair, there is one mistake in at page 22.
Okay.
Sorry.
You're all right. No, Kelly, better to do it now.
It's just the title. It says, and it uses the correct term in the paragraph 78, but the title of that one section 137 charities is 167 charities.
Yeah.
Oh, tiny
There we
bit.
Yeah, we wouldn't want to get that one wrong. No, thank you for that. All right, so content
great,
then
thanks.
as amended? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Good stuff. Where was I? Appendices, yes. Members, any comments or content with this section as drafted?
Yep.
Okay. And then I need to ask, are members content that the minutes from today's meeting are included in this report?
Yes, please.
Great. All right. Okay. So there's no changes to be made? Sure there's not, other than just that small one. So we're fine then to move on. Us?
Sorry.
Do I need to read anything? Oh, do you need to read? Sorry. Yeah. So if there are no changes then, are members then content to agree that the report is final, pending the tidying up of formatting issues and that small change, once those are done, that it is then printed?
Yes, please.
Agreed? Okay.
Yes.
Agreed. Thank you. Okay, members, this concludes committee stage of the bill. I would like to thank all of you for the in-depth scrutiny of the bill, and would like to put on record our thanks to all those who made submissions and gave oral evidence. I would also like to thank again the departmental officials and our Assembly Bill Office officials for their hard work and help in working our way through the bill, and I look forward to the debate for consideration stage. So thank you, members. That's that done. Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item 7, which is committee deliberations on the private tenancies bill. So members at the committee, just remind you that the committee will now continue deliberations on the private tenancies bill. Again, this is not the formal clause-by-clause stage. We're still going through the clauses and reviewing with the department any issues raised by stakeholders or committee members and seek clarification on how the bill addresses these concerns and any additional action the department intends to take on the back of the evidence the committee has received. At this stage, we are still deciding on whether any amendments are to be considered or whether committee recommendation or ministerial assurance would suffice. Members, you've been provided with papers for this item starting at page 47 with a copy of the bill, and a copy of the 2006 order is at page 87. The evidence summary table starts at page 142, the research paper on the bill is at page 371, and the departmental replies to committee queries so far starts at pages 397. In your table papers is a note from the department to advise that the 8-week public consultation period started yesterday to seek views on a range of the notice to quit options. This consultation was highlighted to us on Tuesday. We've got David Polly, Eilish O'Neill and Karen Barr from the department are in attendance today. Claire McCanny from the Bill Office is following proceedings as always and will be available to the committee for a closed session at the end of this session to discuss matters on the bill should members need to discuss options or amendments. So members, you've been provided in your table papers with a departmental response to queries raised on clauses 1 to 5. Members, in another twist of this bill, the Department has now notified us that it will be proposing departmental amendments to Schedule 2. So this is a schedule which gives more form to Clause 9 and relates to energy efficiency regulations. The Department has apologised for the late notice of this proposed change, which officials have planned to highlight during deliberations on Clause 9. However, our rapid progress that we made in the last 2 meetings meant that the work was not completed with the Office of Legislative Counsel when Clause 9 was considered on Tuesday. If the committee is content, the Department has asked that the Department has asked that it can be briefed, that if it can brief the committee on this matter during today's session. The purpose of the proposed amendments is to enable a more comprehensive set of regulations to be developed to allow a more robust process to be put in place around the duties that Schedule 2 will place on landlords. The Department has stated that while the bill will retain the same basic model of prohibiting the letting of public buildings of insufficient energy efficiency, issues raised during the committee's evidence-gathering sessions and its own research have indicated that the primary power to create regulations in this bill as drafted may not be sufficient to fully deliver the policy intent. I know this is good news. I know this is good for our tenants and a positive, but it's a little bit disappointing at this 11th hour that we're having to deal with this now as well. And I know certainly when we speak to Claire, we'll look at any ramifications this might have to our scheduling as well. I mean, as we know, the purpose of bills and the purpose of, or not the purpose, but part of that in committee scrutiny is process, and this falls short of process. So it's just really to put that on the record that although I know this is a positive, it's not good to come at this 11th hour with changes. So can I then I can't speak today, invite the officials to speak to the response on clauses 1 to 5 and on the proposals for Schedule 2. So welcome David, Eilish and Karen to the meeting today. Whoever it might be, can you go ahead? Oh, sorry, Mark. Sorry, Paul wants to come in.
Can I
first.
ask, where is this submission for the first 5 clauses? I can't.
Table papers. You not got it?
There's only 2 items on my agenda: the Charities Bill number 6 and 16, the pension scheme.
Okay.
That's only 2.
Sean's going to send it to you. So yes, Sonia, have it.
Yes, there should be 4 items in your
Should be
table.
4 items in your table papers.
Okay.
If other members need that additional information sent to them, can they let us know if they haven't got it all in their table papers?
4, yeah.
Have you 4, Kelly? Yeah.
Yeah.
Andy?
I think it came through. It was late yesterday. Yeah.
Okay, so Paul, you'll get that additional, and if any members of the Star Leaf can send a message through and let us know if you need the extra.
Can I just read out what should be in your table papers is the Charities Bill report we've just done, the Private Tenancies Bill, Committee Deliberations, the Departmental Briefing Paper on Sub-Regional Stadia, and the Pension Scheme Conversion of Guaranteed Minimum Pensions Bill, Departmental Briefing. They should all be in your table papers.
Okay, folks.
Sent out.
All right, okay. We'll go back then. David, Eilish and Karen, very welcome today. Can I then ask you to go ahead and brief the committee? Can't hear you, David.
So, sorry, Chair, if we start with the responses to clauses 1 to 5,
yeah.
So Eilish is going to go through our reply, which we sent yesterday.
Okay, Chair, can I just ask, for the record, does this have to be read out clause by clause with your questions and the departmental response?
No.
Key issues.
Just the key issues, if you want to go ahead with that.
Okay. Well, in relation to clause 1, the committee had requested some confirmation from us on the update that we gave, and we confirmed that we would be producing comprehensive guidance to assist landlords and tenants with new legislative requirements. We confirmed an online template will be provided for landlords to download and to use, and we confirmed that we will have a communication strategy with publicity around the new legislation. For clause 2 then, this is for tenants to be given notice regarding certain past matters. You asked for confirmation of the response that we gave at the meeting on Tuesday, and we confirmed in relation to clause 2 that there was no retrospective action by virtue of this clause, that it simply protects those tenants who hadn't been given a notice of their tenancy terms because of the repeal that had happened in ERA. Theme 2 then was around rental payments and rental deposits. And the main issues I think that arose out of this were you had asked that that we would consider the definition of the term receipt, and if we needed to define that more fully within the bill. And the advice that we have received is that what we have contained in the bill adequately covers digital receipts or receipts issued by email or any other electronic method. What we intend to do then is to set that out more fully in the guidance that's produced as to what constitutes a receipt, but we've been advised that we don't need to change our bill as is. There was a question that you asked, and apologies, we missed it whenever we were sending this response back to you, and that was when the committee had asked if we would consider what else can be included where a receipt has to be produced by a landlord for a tenant. We had said that where rent is paid, that a receipt must be issued, and committee had asked that we consider if a receipt could be given for any cash payments made in relation to a tenancy, and we have said that yes, we're happy to look at this, and we'll consider it further and take this to Minister. The next thing was the clause 4, the limit of tenancy deposit amount. And the committee had asked that, that the bill,
Can we go back to clause 3 and the time that you have to give back, before you give a receipt, the suggestion by the committee that 28 days?
Oh, apologies, yes. You had asked, first of all, why the receipt, the receipt had to be, there was, it says in the bill, a reasonable period of time, and I know that there had been some discussion at committee around what this meant. So our response to this was that it says in Article 5A of the bill that a receipt is to be given for a cash payment at the time this payment is made, or if that is not possible, as soon as reasonably possible after that time. And the policy intent within this is to accommodate landlords and tenant relationships where the tenant would give the rental payment to the landlord in a more informal setting where the landlord may not have the means to acknowledge the payment, for example, using a receipt book. And should a receipt not be produced, the landlord would be subject to a penalty. And should a receipt be produced, but the tenant feels that the period of time they had to wait for the receipt is too long, they can complain to the council. The council can discuss this with the landlord to get an explanation as to why the receipt was not produced within a reasonable time and impose a penalty if required. And we felt that this gave some discretion to the council in discussing with the landlord as to why a receipt was not produced at the time. It would be our intention again that within the guidance to stress to tenants that you should really only give a receipt where you are going you should only give a payment where you are going to receive a receipt at that point in time. But this was to allow for circumstances where that may not be possible. And we had also been asked by the committee then to consider if we would insert a time period of, and 28 days was mentioned because that was in the bill in relation to other aspects. But we felt that if we put a time limit in as 28 days, it wouldn't really allow for some of the scenarios that we'd highlighted in the response above, and that within 28 days, if a landlord hadn't been able to produce a receipt, rather than the council have the discretion to assess as to why that was not the case, that it would immediately become an offence, and then that removed any element of discretion on behalf of the council. Thanks, David. I skipped over that. Okay, then, sorry, back to clause 4. The department confirmed to the committee that this bill only limits the amount of deposit that a landlord can charge. It doesn't refer to rent in advance, and that the rent in advance and any other tenant fees are going to be looked at in phase 2 of the private rented sector reform. We have been asked by committee then about where a deposit had been paid to a letting agent, and we confirmed that Article 5B contains a requirement that where a landlord or a person acting on behalf of the landlord are required to pay the deposit over, and that the offence is committed by both where the deposit isn't paid. In the 2017 proposals for change, the department had said it would amend the legislation to allow additional time to protect the deposit and to give the required information to the tenant. And there were 13 respondents who answered the question when we asked that in our consultation, and they were all in favour of the increase to 28 days from 14 days that's in the current legislation. Okay, and then in relation to clause 5, which was a query around the extra week in legislation to allow for a tenant to be notified. When we were working through the drafting with our colleagues in OLC through amendment, it was decided that in a scenario where a landlord didn't protect the deposit until day 27, which is within their legal rights under this new legislation to do so, he or she could then require some additional time to get the information to the tenant. So an extra week was legislated for to allow for this type of scenario.
Okay, thank you for that, Ellis. Okay, members, any questions in relation then to the departmental responses? Anything anybody wants to bring up, or happy enough with what we've heard? And we'll be discussing those anyway in closed session with Claire. Paul, do you want to ask something?
Yeah, first of all, I'm not really happy with what I've heard. No fault of the presenters, of course, just the content. I haven't had a real chance to read this yet, so I'm still speed reading it as you were speaking, so forgive me. But just to say that I am still concerned about the new clause 3 of the bill, but the new clause 5(3)(b). I acknowledge the fact that you're going to look at a new subclause or clause amending the 2006 order to include all other payments. I think that's what you said. All other payments apart from rent. Have we explored the issue about affording the tenant an option of payment so that it's just not cash only? Have we actually interrogated that issue? And I'm not sure whether it was one of the formal request responses last time and whether it's contained within this, but there is a concern that I have that tenants would only be afforded one option of payment, and that would be cash. And I think that's wrong. I think there should be an option to pay various ways. Have we explored that?
In relation to rent, to the payment of rent?
Yeah, probably rent and deposit, that there would be an option there.
I think whenever we refer to cash payments for rent in our legislation, those cases would be small in number, would be our understanding, that the majority of rent payments are made by direct debit or by transfer. So this was just to allow for those cases where there are some tenants who make their payments by cash or as a one-off have to make their rental payments by cash, because by and large most people pay this by, as I said, by direct debit or by some sort of an electronic transfer or lodging it into a landlord's bank account. So this was just because we're doing away with the rent book. Yeah. And under the old legislation, where in the old days where someone would have had a rent book and would have handed over their cash and would have had their rent book marked by a landlord as acknowledgement of receipt of the rent. This was just because the rent book isn't determined it's going to be used any longer. It was then to show that, well, you're not going to have a rent book, you must get a receipt for any payment that you make. But by and large, tenants do make their payments electronically.
Yeah, and when you read the 2006 order, you can see that clause 5, it's pincered throughout with regards to the rent book issue. But the question I ask is there anywhere in this bill that bans a landlord from making the tenant pay only by cash? I get that it's very rare, and I get that most people will pay through direct debit. But there may be some circumstances where landlords insist on cash payments only. Is there anywhere within this bill that actually bans that restriction?
No, there isn't.
Is it something that the department would consider looking at?
It isn't something that we had considered during our consultation. Are you thinking in those situations where a landlord, I'm trying to think how to phrase it. It isn't something that we had considered. Landlords, and we haven't consulted on it, landlords may feel that it limits them in some circumstances where it suits them to have a cash payment, but no would be the short answer. We haven't considered it. We haven't.
So we haven't considered it. We haven't done any work on it. It
No.
wasn't part of our considerations when we were drafting the bill.
Yeah, so I'm not saying that a cash payment is wrong. What I'm saying is, given the only option as cash payment could be considered a wee bit suspect and a wee bit dodgy, that you wouldn't afford a tenant the use of direct debit or any other function. Now, I don't know how often it happens, but it just strikes me that if a landlord is insisting on a cash payment only, then, I can't think of any good reason why that would be the case.
I think for us, our focus in this was that making sure that where a tenant does make a cash payment, that they're given a receipt so that they have proof that the payment has been made, and there can't be any dispute with the landlord around a payment not being made, and it's to give the tenant some protection. I suppose we weren't looking at it from a wider aspect as to why would a landlord be looking for a cash payment. I think that would be something that didn't really feature in our discussions or focus whenever we were doing this.
To me, honestly, I think the benefit of cash payment is always on the tenant side. Just by ease, having money on you, all of that. But it may well be an unwise transaction, especially if you don't get. In fact, it is an unwise transaction if you don't get a receipt. Which is moving on to my next point, which is the issue around the receipts. I am still not content that the new 5.3b needs to be there. I understand that you're doing that to ensure that landlords aren't criminalised, but I do not see any scenario where you should hand over money to anyone and not be afforded a receipt in this scenario whereby it's for a deposit or for rent.
We agree that it's extremely unwise for tenants to hand over money without a receipt. If you were to remove this, then the landlord would be in a position of not being able to accept, and just to think through what the ramifications would be of the different suggestions. So you've got option one, which is to take out 5.3b, which means that the receipt has to be paid at the time that the cash is handed over. So if you were to do that, then the landlord would, in some instances, because we know what happens, have to say, well, no, thank you, but not now. So there could be implications coming from that. The second way that was suggested by the committee was that we defined reasonable as being within 28 days. And the danger with that, we think, well, there's two. One is that there could be a reason which is reasonable, which lasts more than 28 days. Certainly conceivable. And the second would be that would mean actually that the default becomes that it has to be paid within 28 days.
Yeah,
and that was our thinking whenever we were.
Yeah, and whilst questions came from this committee on that regard, I'm not on that page because I understand the arguments you make around reasonableness and then around about putting an actual date and time on it because, there'll be different scenarios. I am very much more a purist in this, and that is that you shouldn't be giving cash over, you shouldn't be accepting cash unless you can afford that person a receipt or obtain a receipt. And I think that's basically where I'm at in this. And it would safeguard tenants, I believe, and also landlords, if that scenario wasn't even contemplated in this bill.
I suppose that the last point to make, although you've made your points and we've made our points, so remember at the point of just considering what we do, that there could be some consequences around that. You could put a tenant in default on their rent account, and in some way you are threatening a punishment to a landlord in order to incentivise a tenant to behave in a sensible way. So I accept the point entirely that it's a bad thing for a tenant to hand over rent in cash, but to incentivise the tenant's behaviour by threatening the landlord, and saying to the landlord, well, that means that we would criminalise you if you accepted that, and you couldn't give a receipt on the spot. That doesn't align exactly to incentivise one person's behaviour by threatening a punishment on someone else, I suppose. But I think we might be at the point where we know what you think and you know what we think.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, no, it's perfectly fair to say. And I am still working through it and the ramifications of removing this. I'm still working through that. And again, it's all about unintended consequences and the safeguarding around that, why we have it in the bill and what would it mean taking it out of the bill. So I'm not settled, but I'm still considering it as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Kelly, you want to come in?
Yeah, David, I'm going to throw something in here that has come to me that's missing from private landlords and private landlords of businesses. And that is would one way round this be about the receipt is a statement of payments? So I rent my office at the moment and my landlord's agent provides me with an update statement of payments on a regular basis that includes all the payments that have been made, when they have been made, the date that they were made. But one thing that we don't have for private landlords is any provision which can protect them or the tenant from when payments are made, the date they were received. I'm wondering if that is an option that could be something so that if you have a landlord who does accept a hybrid of cash and direct debit or bank payments, bank transfers, is there something that should be produced then that could be in the template that's provided for landlords, a statement of payments that is produced once a quarter, every 6 months, something like that? Because you do have that within the commercial world, and private landlords of business premises do this on a regular basis. I think that there are a number of agents who do this as well. And I'm just wondering, is there something there that we can do that would satisfy if the 28 days doesn't happen? Obviously, the landlord is due for prosecution, as we know. When there's a fine that should a receipt not be produced, it's subject to a penalty. But can we help the system by having or requiring a statement of payments between the two parties, or is that too much?
Sorry, so you mean within the tenancy, within the template for a landlord, or within the guidance for tenants? There could be a template that a tenant could have produced digitally, and then they could go, when they give the payment over to the landlord, get the landlord to sign this to say that they've received it. Is that what you mean?
No, I'm thinking about the landlord taking on the responsibility for the receipt. So a landlord bumps into Mrs. Jones along the street or somewhere, and Mrs. Jones says, I have in my pocket here the rent for you. Whether it's the landlord has required her to pay cash or Mrs. Jones prefers to pay cash, what I'm thinking is we do have a payment there. And if the receipt's not able to be produced because of that unique situation, maybe somebody's had a bereavement in their family, they're out of the country, or whatever it may be, that there is a statement of payments, so that if the landlord needs to go to court, or if the tenant needs to go to court, if this penalty, the burden of proof is actually there because there's a statement of payments. So January you paid £100 on the 1st. February you paid £100 on the 10th. March you didn't pay. April you paid £200 on the 1st. So there's a statement there that provides proof of payment that would belt and braces a receipt system.
Sounds like a rent book.
I know, doesn't it?
It does.
But it's a statement after the fact. It's not a signed statement in advance. It's a statement after the fact of the payment being received by the landlord.
The same way that some of us would receive mortgage statements, and it's only every 12 months. But in the meantime, we have evidence from our banks and things like that it's been paid every month. We get a sort of summary of what has been paid over that 12-month period, something like that.
Yeah.
At least we could put that in the guidance that.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. If we can help, because it's something that both landlords and tenants would benefit from. So if there's a fall down on either side, they've got that proof, and if it's in the guidance that this has to be provided. As you say, mortgage statements come in every 12 months. It means then that there's other evidence there on top of whatever the receipt is. It could be a piece of paper, could be an email, could be whatever.
Yeah. can I add
to be included in the guidance as opposed to the legislation?
The legislation
you were saying?
is quite specific.
Yeah.
I'm sure the member understands that there's a broader issue around, making sure records are kept correctly, which would help in the event of any dispute and basically avoid any disputes about whether or not rent has been paid. So, but this is a specific issue where a receipt for rent paid in cash is a very particular thing, because that is an area where it's quite likely that there could be a dispute as to whether or not rent was paid in cash.
But if you belt and braces that
So,
with an annual statement,
So if we
and
built and based it in the guidance, then that would probably be helpful for the overall policy intent.
yeah.
Yeah. We'd be happy to do that.
Still don't know whether that keeps Paul right, but it's just another belt and braces. Yeah.
Just to add to that, Chair, if I can, the old 5, clause 5 or article 5 as it was called then, that you're replacing, put a stipulation on the landlord that within 28 days after the date on which the tenancy is granted, provide the tenant with a rent book for use in respect of the dwelling house. So there was a requirement on the landlord to produce a rent book, which in my eyes is a receipt or a recording. Now we're doing away with that, but it seems to be what we're replacing it with doesn't give adequate protection. Well, it gives adequate protection, but I believe then also it doesn't go far enough for the reasons I've outlined with regards to payments of cash on any aspect, not just rent or deposit. The issue about only cash only transactions and no choice, and then also the fact, well, look, a landlord could hold off providing that record or receipt until such times as reasonably possible. Whereas in the old 5, we're actually stipulating it's 28 days. It's reasonable time to produce a rent book.
We lost them. Oh, God.
Okay, bear with us a wee minute. We've gone off Starleaf. It's on my screen and we can't hear anything. And I don't know if David obviously can't hear us either.
Hope that wasn't my account.
Okay, we've lost everything here.
Hit the button.
We'll be emailing broadcasting as we speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna take a short break till we sort this out. So we will, all right?
Yeah.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29.
Okay, we're all back on again. Everybody will be very glad to hear. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. We're blaming it on Paul Frew anyway, because he was last to speak. So, David, we didn't catch anything you had said there when we went off. So if we want to go back to anything, if you wanted to make comment on Paul or Kelly, what Paul and Kelly had said.
Where did we stop?
When Paul stopped speaking,
The
you
old
stopped.
five.
Where were you?
The old clause or Article 5 of the 2006 bill talks about 28 days after the date on which a tenancy is granted, provide the tenant with a rent book for use in respect of a dwelling house. So I suppose what I'm asking is, well, look, there is in the old order that protection and that requirement of a landlord, but yet the new 5, whilst it's affording protection around cash payments, it's probably not as tight as the old 5.
Yeah, I think we wanted to try to improve on it. I mean, the model of the rent book was back to the days whenever somebody came to your house, knocked on the door, you gave them cash in their hand, and they wrote in your rent book that you kept that the rent had been paid, and they walked along the street and did that to all of the houses, the tenants in all of the houses. Nowadays, this would mean that you would pay by bank transfer to the landlord, who would then have to come to your house and write in your book that you had done it. So in most cases, rents are paid electronically. Both parties have a record of that from their bank account, and nothing more is needed. So we wanted to make sure that we still covered off the cash bit. And I'm going back here to the point of replacing clause 5, and that a receipt is paid if cash is paid in rent, because that is the bit where tenants need protected and landlords need protected, because
and
the bit where people pay to buy electric takes care of itself.
So that's the point I make entirely. So you have a scenario, and I can remember it well because I was a wee boy at the time, and I can remember looking at my mum's rent book, or my mum and dad's rent book. It had a picture of the town hall on it, Balmain Town Hall. I can remember it as vividly. And this guy coming to the door every time, and mum paying, and it was always recorded, signatured on the rent book. We're losing that now. We're losing that. And yet, whilst cash payment is very, very rare now, we're still losing that aspect of protection for the landlord and the renter if a receipt or a signature cannot be produced at the time of transaction. And that's the point entirely.
Yeah, and we agree, we wanted it to be paid straight away, but the point of the clause B that we're talking about then is that we did accept that there might be some circumstances where it wasn't possible, given the way things are now, and things are normally paid. So if somebody chose to pay in cash, it wouldn't be set up.
Can I ask a question going back, so the 70s, early 80s? If that person going to collect the money, the landlord or the representative of the landlord, had received rent and not signed the rent book, even by mistake, would that have been an offence?
We'd have to go back and check that. It's not something that I would.
Yeah, I was going to check, because that's before the 2006 order, isn't it? So we'd have to go and check what the legislation said from before the 2006 order.
No, if it's too cumbersome. I'm not asking you to do that if it's too cumbersome. But you see the point I make? Surely?
Yeah. We understand the point that you're making. It's just the consequences of removing any test of reasonableness for not paying it on time, and where that might end up.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is why we have this.
Sorry, Karen, you're on mute, I think.
Can I just say as well, the member did make an interesting point too, that we are bearing in mind in our considerations, because the old clause 5 does include the recording of all payments, whether or not they're rent.
Through the tenancy, yeah.
Yeah,
Paul, what I was going to say was, we were being told by councils when we were consulting that the rent book, there was nobody had rent books anymore, and that it was antiquated. We needed to move with the times. As David's already explained quite clearly there, most people do pay the rent now by standing order, direct debit or something, and they have a record then. They already have a record. So we simply put in a bit about the receipt for cash to cover those instances where, and we do believe there'd be few where people pay in cash.
Yeah, no, I get that, and I agree with you with regards to the rent book is now an antiquated thing. There's only sentimental memories you have now. I get that, but at the same point, I don't think that 5 provides enough protection. First of all, I question in this day and age why it has to be cash. That might be more to help the tenant as opposed to the landlord. But then if that is the case, I do believe that you still need to tighten up 5 for those very rare occasions.
We're not, in the bill there, it's not saying that you have to pay by cash. Yeah. There's a choice still between any agent and landlord. It'll be between a landlord and tenant, and the landlord will ask for payment in a certain way. We're just saying that somebody pays in cash, there's cover here for that person, because, like I said, there's cover for other people through audit trails of bank statements or whatever. So it's not taking away choice. It's just where it's paid in cash. We were trying to provide cover for the person paid in cash.
Yeah, and I get that. It doesn't state that in the bill, and that there is cash. But the point I make is that there could be some scenarios where landlords insist on cash payment only.
Yeah.
And I think that's wrong, and I know it's something I'm raising. I didn't think I raised it. I didn't raise it last week, and I should have. But to me, that's wrong. I think there should always be the choice offered. And you know, direct debit is the handiest way. So why would any landlord want to insist that it has to be in cash? And I'm not saying it happens, but if it does happen, I think it's wrong.
Yeah.
It's not something that has ever been raised with us, that landlords have insisted, and that's not to say that it hasn't happened or doesn't happen, but it's not something that has been raised with us where a landlord has insisted in cash payments. But I mean, who knows, for whatever reasons, if a landlord wants to receive cash, and I am loath to cast any aspersions on any landlord who asks for cash payments, because I just don't have the information that I'm able to quote as to why that would be the case.
Okay, thank you.
All right, members, can we then move on to the proposals for Schedule 2? If you want to give us an overview on that, or tell us why, or tell us what's going on.
Yes, Chair. So I'll do this bit. So the Department's proposing amendments to Schedule 2, which, as you'll know, relates to Clause 9. And a draft amendment is being finalised with OLC, and we'll pass that to the Assembly Bill Office, to Claire McCanny, as soon as we possibly can. We plan to do this next week. I talked to her about this yesterday. In the meantime, I'll set out the changes for the committee today. So Schedule 2 relates to energy efficiency regulations.
Yep.
When reviewing the evidence given to the committee, the Department did some work to consider how the regulations would operate. And on review, we came to the conclusion that Schedule 2 as drafted did not fully enable the regulations that we might wish to make and to fully deliver the policy intent. So I really want to apologise to the committee for the late notice of this proposed change. I'd hoped to tell you about this at the first opportunity during deliberations, and that should have been on Tuesday. And I realise it's only 2 days ago, and I notified you yesterday, but it's an error on our part. I'm very sorry about this. You did refer to the rapid progress that we'd made. I was trying to get this sorted out in time to tell you on Tuesday, and I'm glad I can tell you only 2 days afterwards. So to start off then, just to read into the record what our proposal is. So there's no proposed changes to Clause 9, which introduces Schedule 2. And as I related on Tuesday, Schedule 2 sets out the powers for the Department to make regulations to detail the requirements for the energy efficiency of dwelling houses let under private tenancy, and what the minimum level any energy performance certificate should be. 11G 1 and 2 will still prohibit letting or continuing to let a dwelling house under private tenancy of an adequate energy efficiency. And given the impact of these regulations, the Department considers now that we should make these draft affirmative. Article 11G3 provides the Department may provide exemptions to that prohibition. So we're going to augment this so that exemptions other than those relating to the fabric of the building can be made. In particular, the regulations could provide an improvement exemption. The amendment will also detail other areas the regulations may cover, including designating an authority to oversee the exemption process and public access to lists of exemptions. More detail on exemptions, including the length of time they would last for. Appeals, inspections, applications and other related issues to the processes around getting exemptions for houses that you're proposing to let. The proposed amendment links the required improvement to Article 12 of the 2006 order, which is intended to assist landlords to carry out works to tenanted properties. And Article 11H provides the Department may specify in regulations offences committed by virtue of non-compliance. The proposed amendment introduces an additional offence here relating to continuing to let out a house with an adequate EPC, and then more specific detail around improvement exemptions. And finally, an amendment to Article 72 provides that when making the regulations, the Department must consult with tenants. And on this point, the Department also proposes to make this minor change to Schedule 3. Chair, if I stop there and if there's any questions, and then I want to go on and explain why the Department's doing this, but if there's any questions at this point.
Well, just bear with us. Kelly, have you a question?
I was going to say, David, are we going to tie in if a landlord needs to go into a house to do significant improvements? Will there be any consideration for the notice period for the tenant? Because we could find tenants don't have somewhere to live while a private landlord is carrying out whatever works it may be, if it's substantial works. Are you thinking about anything along the lines of the notice to quit, or some notice period for works?
Well, there's different bits of it, but thinking it through, one of the exemptions that we couldn't make as the bill is drafted now is that a tenant could refuse the works, which would leave a landlord in the position of either breaking the prohibition or having to evict the tenant.
Okay.
And we didn't think this was sensible. All of the work done around energy improvement would imply that the best time, the optimum time to do it, is when the house is empty. So either a change of tenancy in the private rented sector or the social sector, or when you've just moved into your new house in the owner-occupied sector. So we didn't necessarily think that was sensible, and we wanted to be able to have an exemption around that. So that was one of the things that got us thinking about this area in the first place. The second thing is we are proposing to put a duty. So there's a bit of the Act, the 2006 Act, which talks about where the landlord has a duty to do something that the tenant has to let them in, and the landlord can try and can go to court to enforce that. The judge could obviously decide that there's mitigating circumstances for the tenant, but at the minute that would apply to things like gas inspections and things like that. So we would be proposing that where the landlord is obliged to carry out energy efficiency improvements, that would fall into the definition of a duty, and that would help landlords carry out work. Does that answer your question?
No,
I mean, it wouldn't be our intention would be try to avoid. One of the reasons we're changing this is to try and avoid the need for tenants to be evicted, so that works can be carried out to avoid the prohibition.
I'm just thinking about, will there be a deadline for private landlords to complete the work, or is this over, the reason why I'm saying that is because at this stage we don't know what the standards are and how much work a private landlord may have to do to a house to bring it up to those standards, and it may not be fit for purpose for a tenant, a long-term tenant, to remain within that building while the work's being done. Now, that may not be a break in tenancy. So if you have someone who's been living there for, my goodness, could be, 10 plus years, as we know, and particularly if it's older people who have no intentions of moving out, want to stay with their landlord, love their home, but this work does have to be done, and the landlord has to perhaps do it by a certain date. It's what protections we can give to tenants that they will be given enough notice that if they do have to find another place, or is there any compunction on a landlord to provide another domicile for that person during a period where they have to move out? It's just that clarification, because we don't know the standards yet or what the implications could be of that rule.
So, as I said, one of the things we wanted to do was make it so that give ourselves the possibility of the work being done more gradually, so that a landlord wasn't obliged to come to a point and suddenly have to do an awful lot of very intrusive work, and also bring in the ability for tenants that we could introduce an exemption for tenants to refuse work, and that would be fine for the landlord. So we should stop trying to avoid those things happening. On terms of are there different notices to quit? If it came to that, and the point of this system would be to try and avoid it coming to that wherever possible. And I think the revisions that we're proposing will be a lot more successful in avoiding that sort of scenario than the bill as drafted would allow us to do.
I suppose this isn't notice to quit, it's notice for maintenance, that you need to move out for a period of time. Yeah, different from notice to quit.
Members, I'm quite conscious that we really haven't had a chance to look at this in any great detail as well.
So do you want me to explain why the department's proposing to do it? And then, the point is we need to get this sent over as quickly as possible, isn't it?
Yeah.
And my proposal is to do that by the middle of next week.
Yeah, because that gives us a chance to get a look at it then, without getting into too much detail. So go ahead, David.
So, why is the department proposing this amendment? So we have concerns that the powers that Schedule 2 has drafted would be too limiting in terms of the regulations they would allow us to put in place. The original powers were conceived and were mainly concerned with fuel poverty. The powers will now be a tool to drive the decarbonisation of a significant portion of the housing stock to deliver our climate change obligations. We'll need to ensure that we can enforce a higher level of energy efficiency using these regulations to EPC-C at least, or possibly even a B, depending where we go. And this would be more intrusive and expensive, possibly costing tens of thousands of pounds in older houses. We can't have a significant number of exempt dwellings, and we need comprehensive powers to enforce, as the stakes and benefits from evasion will be that much higher. By way of example then, the bill as drafted would mean that we could not have an exemption for tenants' refusal of works, which would mean the landlord would be in the heartbreaking position of having to evict them to do the works or break the prohibition. We could only have exemptions would be for entire types of buildings where it was not realistic to reach the required level of energy efficiency. And there would be no requirement to carry out any works at all to exempt buildings. We couldn't have put much process around the exemptions, and this would have greatly limited enforcement. So fundamentally, the department would have been inevitably forced at some point to choose between risking supply of private rented housing and delivering energy efficiency improvements. The department feels that a process is needed that drives improvement across all private rented houses and limits the impact on landlords to what is manageable and does not risk supply shocks. So the revised schedule will allow the regulations to have other features which allow us to set up a system that can deliver the policy objectives. So policy objectives being much higher energy efficiency in the private rented sector over the period of 2050, reduction in fuel poverty and meeting our carbon reduction goals. And we allow us to do this in a way which is deliverable and avoids shocks to the private rented sector supply and would increase housing stress.
Okay, thank you for that, David. I mean, we absolutely get that these are positives, so they are, albeit we're not overly happy with how it's all worked out, but they are positives, and that's good. So it is. So I think the committee need to be allowed time just to talk about this. We're going into closed session shortly anyway, with Claire from the Bill Office on how we proceed. So I think if I could stop conversation on it, or Kelly, if you some briefly want to say.
Well, it's just. We know that the department has released, it's about the consultation that's out at the moment. I just wanted to ask, has the department reached out to all of those who have given evidence to our committee during this process to ensure that they're aware that I know it's out in the public domain, but that they are specifically aware, I'm thinking about Renters' Voice and different people like that, about the consultation so that they can feed in, because they provided fantastic evidence to us, and it would be good to have their input as part of your consultation.
Yes, we'll have indeed, Kelly, yeah.
And
we'll have done,
we've
Brilliant.
had various other meetings with Renters' Voice, which have been really brilliant up to this point as we're preparing for this. Chair, we were asked, it was suggested that we might want to very briefly outline what's in the notice to quit consultation.
Yeah.
Yep, go ahead. Yep, briefly if you can, yeah.
Okay, so I'll just take this one because I was working on it. So we notified you obviously on Tuesday that it would launch, and we managed to get it launched yesterday. A minister wrote to yourselves to inform me of that. The purpose of the consultation is really to inform the policy around the notice to quit, both in the bill passage in the Assembly and then the possible further use of clause 11.5, which gives us an option to increase it in the future. The current bill, as you know, has the 8 weeks notice in it for a tenant, for a landlord required to give a tenant 8 weeks notice for tenancies longer than 12 months and up to 10 years. But Minister felt that she was concerned that that's still not enough, and you've said yourself, for a tenant sometimes to find suitable, affordable and alternative accommodation. And she asked us to do further work on this. And also bearing in mind the context has changed since the pandemic, and that the notice has increased to 12 weeks for all tenants and landlords during that period. Notice to quit, as you know, it's a crucial part of the private tenancy law, provides protection for both landlords and tenants. It's important that changes in this area are properly considered and based on sound policy rationale. So CIH were commissioned to carry out some research, and that research has been summarised in our consultation document so that it provides the most up-to-date information and research that we'll have to help those who are going to respond, to inform them and giving them the most up-to-date information. The research includes consideration of views of tenants and landlords, practice elsewhere and human rights implications, and the consultation asks a number of questions, such as the purpose of the notice to quit, that it's reasonable that notices vary depending on the length of tenancy, that notice to quit it also looks at the notice to quit for tenancies under 12 months. It looks at notices for over 12 months to 10 years and gives options for 8 weeks, 12 weeks or 26 weeks, with possible exemptions if it was to be increased. And it looks at notices to quit for houses multiple occupation. So it actually addresses many of the issues that were raised during the evidence sessions from the different groups around notice to quit. So it closes on the 25th of January, and then we will analyse those responses, and we will publish a report in due course, and obviously keep the committee informed at every stage as we go. We know this isn't ideal coming in the middle of the bill, but it's something that tenants are really looking forward to seeing some sort of an increase in the notice to quit. So it would be a terrible shame if at this point, that it ends up having to be pulled from the bill or anything like that. We want to be able to give them as much protection as possible.
No, and we would agree with that as a committee, absolutely 100%. That we want to see them have as much protection as possible as well. Members, any questions around that consultation at this stage? Or will we just wait and see how that progresses? Yeah? All right. Okay, look, thank you, David, Eilish and Karen. Thank you very much for your time this morning, and no doubt we will be speaking to you next week again anyway. Do well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. All right, members, then if we can bring then everybody into the spotlight along with Claire, we're going to then move into closed session to further discuss the bill with Claire McCanny. So our members agreed to that? Yeah. Agreed? Yes?
Agreed, yeah.
Yep, okay. All right, we're moving into closed session then.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room.
Okay, members, we're back in open session again, and we're going to move to agenda item 8, which, before I do that, actually, I have a couple of things I need to mention, or well, one I need to mention. In our closed session, the committee then agreed that we would be extending the committee stage of the support for mortgage interest bill until the 18th of February. So, members agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, we're going to move on then to agenda item 8, which is a raised briefing on the Betting, Gambling, Lotteries and Amusements Amendment Bill. We really do need to find something shorter for that term. Members, can you turn to page 412 of your pack, and welcome Eleanor Murphy to the meeting. Eleanor, you're very welcome. Good to have you here. There we are. Eleanor's up and members are out.
Sorry, Chair.
You're okay.
Good morning.
Oh, Eleanor, you're very pink this morning, so you are.
Oh, it's a lovely pink glow.
Isn't it just? Eleanor, if you want to go on ahead and brief the committee, I'm sorry to keep you waiting as well.
No problem. I'll try to do it as quickly as possible because you're probably running over. If it's okay with you, I'm going to share my screen as well. It's just easier for you to follow rather than me just talk to it. So I'm just going to provide you with a very quick overview of the bill's context, an overview of the clauses of the bill, a quick recap on issues that members raised during second stage, and also look at some of the issues not included within the bill but may possibly potentially be included in the second stage of reform. So the bill itself consists of 16 clauses, and 14 of these are substantive clauses. It's introducing a series of amendments to the Betting, Gaming, Lotteries and Amusements Northern Ireland Order 1985, which is over 35 years old now. And the Department has stated that it accepts that the current legislation is outdated, hasn't kept pace with industry and technological changes, and it's complex and inflexible. So the regulation of online gambling, as you know, is a significant issue that isn't addressed in the 1985 order or the bill. However, the Ministers indicated that the bill represents only the first stage of a much broader programme of reform that may be brought forward in the next mandate. So just to let you know of two important developments in other jurisdictions that may impact on the bill, but the wider regulation of gambling in Northern Ireland. So in Great Britain, there was a review of the Gambling Act. The Gambling Act in Great Britain regulates online gambling, and whilst it doesn't extend to Northern Ireland to a large extent, gamblers in Northern Ireland are using the same websites as gamblers in Great Britain. So it does have relevance here, very important. There was a call for evidence launched by the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport in December. It closed in March of this year, and there have been 16,000 submissions. That's a massive response. And the government has indicated that they will be publishing a white paper setting out and consulting on the next steps within the coming months. So I don't know whether the committee wants to, or rather it would be appropriate to feedback some of the evidence sessions, information to evidence sessions that you've had into that white paper consultation. So again, just why is it important if gambling is devolved? Because the gambling review looked at online protections for players, advertising, sponsorship and branding, a lot of which isn't devolved to Northern Ireland. It'll look at the Gambling Commissioner's powers and resources, consumer redress mechanisms, age limits and age verification. So just to let you know that down south, another big development is that the Minister of State down there has published the general scheme of the Gambling Regulation Bill. So there's a significant programme of reform of gambling is going to take place down south. The programme for government committed to establishing a gambling regulator down south, which will have wide-ranging powers, including it will become the licensing authority, and it will also regulate gambling advertising websites and apps, and look at issues such as gambling fairness, safeguards for problem gamblers, and gambling and crime. So why is it relevant to here? Because of the cross-border nature of some of the gambling activities, some of the businesses that operate up here may also operate down south. And also we can probably draw some lessons in effective regulations, compliance and enforcement for the second stage of reform. So just very quickly, this is a table that was extracted from a recent House of Lords report that looked at gambling-related harm, and it shows how gambling just isn't an issue for one department. It involves many departments, and therefore requires, the committee argued, required a cross-departmental multi-agency response. So whilst the box outlines the different department roles across the water, they're largely very similar to our departments here. Also, just to to say that there's also Northern Ireland to say that north-south relationship and also the GP-NI relationship in terms of the activities of the Gambling Commission. The Minister did outline that she was trying to set up a cross-departmental group on gambling during the second stage of the bill. So the committee just might want to consider, for information purposes, getting an update on that group and who's going to sit on that. So I've taken very quickly through the substantive clauses of the bill. There's more information on the paper, some cross-jurisdiction analysis, and also some issues that you might want to have a look at, which I'll not go over because you're running out of time. So Clause 2 removes the existing Sunday and Good Friday trading prohibitions on licensed bookmakers. Clause 3 amends the definition of betting work to extend Sunday working protection to workers in licensed bookmaking offices. Clause 4 permits the operation of pool betting and licensed bookmakers. Now, this clause I found particularly technical, so the committee, if you're like a bit of a flutter, it probably makes absolute sense to you. But if you're not, it might be quite technical, and the committee might want to consider asking the department maybe to provide a short brief on what pool betting is and exactly how this clause will impact on that. So Clause 5 will amend the eligibility requirements in relation to persons who may take part in bingo and licensed premises, essentially removing that 24-hour waiting period between application for membership and when you can actually pick bingo. Clause 6 removes the existing Sunday and Good Friday trading prohibitions in licensed bingo clubs, and also the prohibition on gaming machines during those days. Clause 7 creates new offences in relation to inviting, causing or permitting a person under the age of 18 to play anything other than low-stakes gaming machines. So I suppose the key thing there is the definition of inviting, causing and permitting, and you won't want to draw that out in your evidence sessions. Clause 8 reworks Article 131 of the order, so to exclude free to enterprise draw competitions from the definition of the lottery. Article 168 of the 1985 order currently prohibits the conduct of certain newspaper and other prize competitions in Northern Ireland. However, Clause 11 seeks to remove free prize to enter competitions from this prohibition, and the new schedule in the bill sets out what does and does not constitute a requirement to pay. Clause 9, very important for local charities and clubs and societies. It removes the £1 limit on society lotteries and also alters the rules on deductible expenses. And I know you're going to hear more from Nick on that issue. Clause 10 removes the current residency and incorporation requirements in relation to the granting of bookmakers licences, bingo clubs licences, gaming machines, certificates or permits. It also reduces the lower age limit for granting those licences, certificates and permits from 21 to 18 years of age. So Clause 12 replaces the existing definition of cheating. So currently the definition of cheating only comes into operation. The offence is only applicable if you actually win anything. So it's replaced by, the bill proposes to replace this as whether or not somebody has won an amount of money. Clause 13 provides contracts in relation to gambling to be legally enforceable, because, as the Chair pointed out before, they're more gentlemen's agreements at the moment. Clause 14 provides DFC with the power by way of regulations to impose a financial levy on applications for the grant of licences, etc. The regulations may also set out when the levy is to be repaid, for example, if an application is unsuccessful, and regulations will also identify how the amount of levy is to be determined. So there's some more information in the paper about different countries that have levies and how those are actually, the amount is actually calculated. So Clause 15 requires the Department to issue and publish codes of practice and outlines the procedure for issuing and revising those codes. So there's a quick at-a-glance table on page 10 to 15 of the paper, which you might find helpful, just summarises what I've just covered. So a recap of the issues raised by members during second stage. Some want to see greater regulation of gambling advertising and sponsorship. Other members want to see an enhanced regulation of online gambling. In fact, this was a significant issue raised at the second stage. A ban on the use of credit cards for gambling, greater protections for vulnerable and problem gamblers, greater regulations in terms of age verification and self-exclusion. further regulation of fixed odds betting terminals in Northern Ireland, and a more preventative approach to gambling-related harm with a greater emphasis on educating children and young people. So there's lots of issues that have been, other issues have been raised by the all-party group on reducing gambling-related harm, which is an excellent report. But they've also launched a new inquiry into gaming machines last month, so I'll follow that closely as well. So just another piece of information that you may be aware of, which is quite pertinent. It was a DFC press release on the 1st of November. It stated that the Minister announced there will be a short, focused consultation on a mandatory code of practice for the gambling industry with key stakeholders. The plans to make compliance with the code a condition of a licence, and requirements within the code will include a ban on the use of credit cards in gambling transactions, a ban on the practice of reverse withdrawals, and the location of ATMs and gambling establishment, further protections for children and young people, including age verification standards, and tighter controls of fixed odds betting terminals. So the committee might just want to consider asking the department for an update on that. So I'm happy to take any questions you have, and if I don't know the answer to them, I'll come back to you.
Look, thank you, Eleanor, as always. Great work, and it will be very beneficial as we go through this. I know for me, certainly you mentioned there pool betting and how you knew very little about it before you started looking into this. I have to say, betting in general, I know very little about it before we even start this. So your key findings in your table, I think it's something that all of us need to have beside us as we go through each of our witness sessions. And I know we had our first one last week where we had in the turf bookmakers who have already put in place, many of them, a ban on credit cards and things like that. So there seems to be some precedence there. I have no questions because this is something I need to really sit and digest in great detail because it's not my, it's not something I know a great deal about, though I do imagine by the end of it we'll all know lots about gambling in every sense. And so, members, any questions on for just clarification for Eleanor? I think much of it is covered greatly. Kelly?
I just was going to ask, Eleanor, that last slide that you had, the consultation that has come out by the Minister now on what will include, payment by credit cards. That was one of the things I was potentially looking at as an amendment to the bill, a possible new clause banning the use of credit cards. So, to be honest, if they're taking that forward, that wouldn't be something that we can, again, as committee, consider, but we may put into our report. Do you know when that consultation, when is that consultation due to finish again?
I'm not too sure, Kelly. I just don't have the information that's on the press release, so I was wondering, the committee might like to consider just asking the department for further information on that and an update of when the consultation will launch and when it is to conclude.
Yeah, no,
So we don't have any further information than that.
I know it's another consultation that has come out in the middle of the committee consideration stage, which is very useful, but it's just a pity it wasn't done before it got to us. No, but this paper is brilliant. As always, the questions are there for us to be able to hit home to the department with. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. Anybody else? Anything for Eleanor? What I was then going to ask then are members in agreement that we send the raised paper through to the department for responses to all of those questions that Eleanor has raised, and also for a written response to the questions that were raised at second stage. Yeah, we need those responses sooner, and as a matter of urgency too.
Yeah,
which we've yet to receive. So, yes, members agreed that we send this paper through? Yes?
Agreed.
Get those
yes.
answers. Anything else anybody wants to ask of Eleanor at this stage? Or I know Eleanor will come back to us if there is anything that we need her to do or need her to answer. Kelly?
Eleanor, this might be a really stupid question, so please forgive me, but I'm concerned, I don't understand this under Article 9, which is the rules for societies and lotteries. Or societies lotteries, sorry. You've gone through in your paper and quite detailed about the percentage of expenses that still would come in, can be allowed. What confuses me completely is we're doing this for Northern Ireland, and you'll see in the TV all the time, there's different charities, big charities who are offering like £3 million for a house, and there's that would still be allowed to happen, wouldn't it? People from Northern Ireland are still able to go and take part in those type of societies lotteries or charitable lotteries.
Yeah.
But
I think it all depends on whether they have to pay to participate in those, and whether there's other rules as well, Kelly. I'd have to go back and clarify those.
That's
what happens in Great Britain. There's almost a two-tier system for societies lotteries, where larger lotteries have to, larger organisations that run lotteries have to be licensed by the Gambling Commission, and there's something like a £5 million cap on the prizes that they can offer. And then there's smaller society lotteries, which are probably your sports clubs, and there's a I think it's a £25,000 limit. So NITFA will definitely be able to provide you with further information on that, but I'll have a look and I'll come back to you if that's okay.
I'm just confused that if the organisation is within Northern Ireland, we can deal with that. But it's where these adverts are coming through that originate outside Northern Ireland, elsewhere in GB. Like for instance, we have the People's Lottery, the health one, or these ones that are offering houses, massive prizes. But I don't know how this bill will manage that because they're outside of Northern Ireland.
I'm not entirely sure, Kelly, to be honest with you, but I'll go back and try to clarify that with the department.
Thank you. It's not a stupid question then. I wasn't picking it up on the wrong. Thank you.
No questions or stupid questions ever.
Nope.
They aren't. No. Anybody else? Anything that they want to ask of Eleanor? No. All right. Okay. Look, Eleanor, again, brilliant. Thank you so much for all of the hard work you do to assist this committee. It really is appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
All right. Bye bye, Eleanor. All right, members, then we will move on to agenda item 9, which is a departmental briefing on the sub-regional Stadia programme. You'll find the briefing paper for this at page 480, and in your table papers is a letter we received yesterday on the issue from NIFL. So can I then welcome to the meeting Catherine Hill and Nicola Leckie. You are both very, very welcome. Catherine and Nicola, welcome to the committee this morning.
Thank you.
So can I go ahead and if you could brief the committee, that would be great. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, I couldn't quite hear you there.
Well, I just said if you want to go ahead and brief the committee, that would be great. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. So thank you for the opportunity to update members today on the work that's been carried out in the sub-regional Stadia programme. Hopefully you found the written pre-brief useful. So I propose to give a brief verbal overview and then we're happy to take any questions. So members will be well aware that the programme dates back to 2011 when it first received executive endorsement. So the initial proposals were based on the draft 2011 IFA facility strategy, and this document set out 5 defined strands. So Strand 1 identified £10 million for the redevelopment of the Oval. Strand 2 referenced designated or selected venues with an anticipated cost of £17 million. Strand 3 proposed an investment of £3 million for non-designated grounds. Strand 4 reflected the provision of £3 million investment towards a high-performance facility. And Strand 5 covered intermediate and junior football, which was an investment of £3 million for a single high-quality facility. There was a 12-week public consultation from November 2015 through to February 2016 based on the proposals for this 5-strand approach to the programme. There were 1,079 responses, 98 from named organisations and 1,181 from individuals. Now, the key findings from this consultation were as follows. There's almost universal support for investment in golf facilities. There was, however, support for a more equitable share of funds across the strands, rather than earmarking a substantial amount for an individual club or for designated versus non-designated venues. It was also considered that the proposals didn't address the needs of rural and grassroots clubs. And there was further backing for additional weighting for clubs in areas of high deprivation. And finally, a preference was identified for the use of the IFA facility strategy dated 2012 rather than the 2011 draft document. And this was also supported in the IFA response. So for the members' information, the 2012 Facility Strategy document were strands of investment. Strand 1 was a national training centre. Strand 2 was looking to establish a number of high quality, moderate capacity venues of up to UEFA Category 3 standards. Strand 3 looked to support health and safety improvement at designated venues. And Strand 4 covered football development facilities, which was really targeted investment to increase participation and improve revenue generation. So the consultation report on these proposals wasn't published until Minister Hargey assumed office. This report's on the department's website and it was shared with you in your pre-brief. No decisions were taken on the programme before the suspension of the Assembly in January 2017. So upon taking up office in January 2020, with the programme confirmed as an NDNA commitment, Minister Hargey recognised the considerable period of time that had passed and instructed officials to undertake a refresh and re-engagement exercise. The purpose of this exercise was to ensure that the Minister could make an informed strategic decision based on up-to-date evidence and information, both the current and future needs of football at all levels across the region. So this exercise was informed through a number of sources: a club survey, one-to-one stakeholder interviews, benchmarking and an advisory working group. So in August 2020, the department issued a survey to clubs at all levels across the region. We were looking to identify the standard of existing facilities, but also what improvements were needed to meet strategic priorities. So the survey was open for 6 weeks and there were 90 responses returned from 467 clubs contacted. So this represented 1,495 teams, which included male and female teams and youth and disability teams. In terms of NIFL teams, there were a total of 29 responses out of a possible 35 teams, so this was a response rate of 83%. So the survey has established a body of evidence which helps identify the current strategic facility needs for football and has enabled the department to work with the support of the advisory working group to identify how the needs have changed since 2011. It's also enabled the programme to consider the impact of COVID on football and what's needed to rebuild participation. In addition to the club survey, officials have held a number of one-to-one discussions with key stakeholders. This has included the IFA, NIFL, Sport NI, Disability Sport NI and all 11 district councils. Members will also be aware that officials have benefited from the guidance and support of an advisory working group that was established to provide expert insight into the strategic needs of football. So this group included representation from the IFA, NIFL, CLOA, Sport NI and Departmental officials. So in conclusion, as a result of all this engagement and with support from the Strategic Investment Board and from the department's economists and statisticians, the department has developed a robust body of evidence and associated analysis to inform decisions on the programme. There's been a real emphasis on a collaborative approach to best identify the strategic needs across all levels of football. Officials are continuing to work with the advisory working group to explore the delivery process for the programme. We're also continuing to meet and liaise with individual clubs, councils, elected representatives and organisations to remain sighted on the facilities specific to football. The Minister has publicly stated her commitment to the delivery of the programme in the Chamber and to the positive impact it will have on the wider community. She's currently actively considering the outcomes of the refresh and the re-engagement exercise and is working at pace to fully consider all the collated evidence. Once she's satisfied that the programme reflects both the current and future needs of football, she intends to present her recommendations to executive colleagues. Okay. She's in the final stages of these considerations and is committed to bringing forward recommendations on the shape and scope of the programme within this mandate. We're happy to take any questions members might have.
Okay, look, thank you for that. And just before I open up to members, I have Andy and then I have Stephen waiting to come in. I just want to put on record that it is very disappointing. This committee is almost 2-year-old now, and we've been asking from the very beginning issues around the sub-regional stadia. It's disappointing that we're now coming to almost the end of the mandate, and albeit the Minister has said that she very much wants to see progress in this before the end of this mandate, given workloads and pressures, I would worry greatly that we're going to go through another mandate where nothing really has been done on this. I know we have been waiting 2 years, never mind the 10 years that our clubs out there have been waiting. So I think, just to say to you, I think members can be forgiven for the utter frustration that every one of us feel around this. You know, it simply has not been good enough. So I am going to open it up to members who are certainly a lot more passionate about this subject. So I'm going to go to Andy first and then to Stephen. So Andy. Thanks,
Chair, and I would echo your comments. By the time this is rolled out, if it is achieved as the timeline has been outlined, it'll be 11 years since the executive endorsed this. It's just not an acceptable way of doing government. And if members' frustration can be evidenced, I'm sure those are the clubs that have spent thousands upon thousands of pounds of their own money to carry out the various different elements to bring forward their plans, will be deeply frustrated in relation to that. Can I then ask when the AWG concluded?
So the work of the AWG, Andy, is ongoing, and in fact we most recently met early in November. So the AWG will continue to provide insight as we work through the business case process. When we met in November, we were considering, for example, partnership funding, delivery mechanisms and financial sustainability. So the work of the AWG has not concluded yet, and we would see that continuing throughout the process.
Okay, apologies, perhaps I framed that wrong. When did the Refresh and Re-engage project conclude then?
So, the work of the Refresh and the Re-engage process really concluded over the summer. So at that point, we were presenting all the information to the Minister, but I suppose it never really concludes because we continue to investigate and look at facility needs and see what clubs are bringing forward. So I suppose it's not an actual conclusion.
Yeah, right, but it says concludes in your briefing document. But besides the point, there will have to come a cut-off point in order for the Minister to consider, and that was with the Minister in the summer. When are we likely to have the detail of this? When are the clubs going to have the detail of this?
So, as I said, Andy, the Minister is publicly committed to bringing this forward within this mandate. She's actively considering the evidence at the moment, and she's hoping to bring forward recommendations to the Executive as soon as possible.
Yeah. To be honest, I'm going to be blunt here, that's not good enough, and that's not at yourself. As the Chair had said, 2 years we've been asking questions repeatedly about this. I appreciate that we've been in the midst of a pandemic, but this is 11 years in the making, and the fact that we can't even get a timeline, we can't give the clubs any more information. Okay, yes, it's positive that the Minister is committing to bring it forward before the end of the mandate, but with so many different projects we've heard that. So I personally want a much more definitive timeline. I would like to have that, and I would ask that that be considered by the Department to provide that to this committee in terms of the timeline. Can I ask from the wider engagement, the AWG, the stakeholder meetings and the club survey, are there any common themes coming out from that?
Yeah, I mean, from the clubs, their main priorities are very clearly coming out as meeting UEFA and IFA criteria. They're looking to increase participation, increase members, and I suppose COVID has given that even more impetus. They're trying to rebuild the participation levels. So from the club perspective, their investment priorities are very much about new pitch surfaces, training facilities, floodlighting. I suppose what didn't come through quite as clearly as maybe we would have liked is the disability access and inclusion piece. And that's something we'll really look to focus on when we establish the criteria. Whenever we looked at the continuous household survey, it showed that about 10% of adults participate in football, and that goes up to about a third of young people and children. But when you look at, for example, the female split, it's only 1% of females versus 16% of males. And similarly, disability, 3% of those with a disability versus 11% of those without. So that's a theme we'd be really keen to build on as we work through the criteria. But really what the clubs are telling us is that there's a lack of funding and that they need that funding to drive their participation and drive their offering.
No, absolutely. And just on those 2 points in relation to female participation and those with disabilities, what steps has the Department taken to expand on that information and knowledge as part of the informed decision making?
So in terms of disability, we are a key partner in the Active Living No Limits engagement. So we will work closely with the likes of Disability Sport, and we're keen to promote disability engagement in all sports, not just football. Sport NI are also doing some work around inclusion. They will be looking to develop a strategy on female participation in sport. Now in football, we have seen a huge increase in female involvement in sport, but it's from a very low base. So there's still a lot of work to be done there. Obviously, the success of the women's team will hopefully drive that even more. So it's an area of work that we're really very focused on. And as we look to develop a new strategy, one of our key themes is about promoting inclusion, promoting access to all, and ensuring that there's facilities that are welcoming to everybody who wants to take part.
Okay, I appreciate that. Just in respect of the previously identified strands, the themes that you'd outlined, the 5, have they significantly changed, or will they significantly change?
I mean, obviously, I can't comment on what the scope of the programme will look like till the Minister makes her recommendations, but what she will do is take on board the feedback from the consultation and the feedback from the evidence that we've gathered over the past couple of years.
As some may term the million-dollar question, how much funding has been identified as being required to roll out the need?
So the budget remains at the 36.2 million that was established in the first instance, and that level of strategic need was informed by the 2011 facility strategy. But early indications do suggest that may not meet all the need out there. And obviously any decision to increase this amount will be a matter for the executive. Because of the very nature of the Stadia and the facilities that are out there, it's very hard to explicitly state the level of potential need at the moment. But as we work through the OBC process, we'll assess whether further need is there. We look to work with the SGSA, and they are going to assess the Stadia out there in terms of safety. So they'll be able to assess the level of investment needed to improve the health and safety aspects. And they'll also be able to assess the level of investment needed to move grounds from their current position to the next higher UEFA standard. So there is more work to be undertaken once the strands are developed to see what the actual need is, and if there's additional need, then we'll need to progress that. So
given that there's more work that's going to need to be undertaken, when is it likely that the clubs will start to see this money filter through?
So once the Minister makes her recommendations, our first steps will be to work on the refresh SOC, which we're already doing work on, and then start to develop the business cases. And again, research and work to support those is already being undertaken. So we would look to develop those, as quickly as we could. We'll also look to work in tandem with that. We'll look at the criteria, the application forms, the delivery mechanisms. So as soon as we get strategic direction of the programme, we'll be able to take a lot of strands forward, and we've already done a lot of the base work to do that. Yep. But until we know the shape and scope, very hard to put an exact time frame on it.
No, I appreciate that. And given the fact that there's no funding allocated within the current budget, I'd imagine the department don't anticipate any money going out the door in respect to that, to the clubs. That is, I know there's some funding around the background, the backroom staffing and so forth, so on, but there's nothing planned for this mandate in terms of money out to clubs.
No, not in 21-22. Obviously, DFC has bid for capital funding for the next 3 years, but the outworkings of the budget aren't yet known, so I can't confirm what the allocations are at the moment.
But you've included the 36.2 million that is currently identified within the budget exercise over the next 3 years? Yeah, we've bid for the 36.2 million. So but as I said, we haven't had confirmation of the budget yet, so I can't confirm what will be in our budget allocation. Okay, and can you give any more information in relation to how that will be broken down over the 3 years of that budget? Obviously, it's going to be the latter years with the biggest amount of the budget going out. I suppose it will depend on the shape of the programme. I mean, smaller elements of work may be able to take place at the earlier stages, but if we were, expecting significant construction, it's obviously going to be the latter end of the budget by the time processes work through the planning, etc., etc. So it's really hard to put, a phasing of the budget until we know the shape of the programme. And then, final question, in terms of obviously analysing the overall required budget, have there been any engagement from the department with the wider construction sector in relation to the increased construction costs to better understand what may be needed? No, not at this stage, Andy, but obviously the impact of inflation will have to be considered in the context of the OBC process, because we'll need to know what the budget can buy in today's market. But again, it's back to the shape of the final programme. For some of the smaller pieces, it may be more the local market, less impact of construction inflation. For larger construction, likely to be a much greater impact. So those we will take consideration of all of those in the OBC process. Thanks,
Okay,
Charlie. They're
Kelly.
probably asked enough.
Kelly, you wanted a supplementary before I bring Stephen in?
Yeah, and I'm sure I maybe come in after Stephen and talk about the money, but I wanted to go back to one of the issues, just to tease that out with you, that Andy had raised about, and it came through the discussion there, about inclusive clubs. And I'm very keen to ensure that within the department there is a tying together of different work streams. We know that the Minister's planning to bring out the disability strategy has been extended, but the gender strategy is there. So if we're talking about people with disabilities and women in sport, and particularly with football in relation to this, how's that tying together within the department?
So I have been involved in some of the working groups in the disability strategy. So we are working together to knit together the various themes. We obviously have our sports strategy. We're looking to bring that out shortly too. So there's close engagement to make sure the various strategies complement each other and work together, as opposed to reinforce the impact that they can all bring individually.
Okay. Does that actually realise any money on a cross-departmental level then? Because if we're talking about gender and disability, then that could lever money out of other departments such as health. You know, there's so much more there. There's also an issue from finance, the building regulations for changing places toilets, that any of the programmes coming forward through this will need to include a changing places toilet as opposed to excluding that. Is that all within that thinking?
Absolutely, Kelly, and you know you're saying exactly what we're hoping to hear from other departments. You know, leveraging funding on a collaborative basis is going to be key to the success of many of these strategies. You know, the benefits of sport and physical activity go far beyond physical well-being, mental well-being, the social inclusion. We already work closely with our colleagues in, for example, DAERA, and we're doing work in rural areas. We've leveraged funding from them, from the Education Authority when we've been working with schools. I think, you know, one thing COVID I think has brought out is a real appetite to work collaboratively, and I would hope that as we work through that we'll see funding leveraging to projects that can support many strands of, you know, to support our communities.
It's also, don't forget the Executive Office, because Shared Society comes into that. I spoke to Kilmore Rec, who are delighted that their plans, hopefully they'll get the money through this programme, is very much cross-community. The final thing you'd mentioned as well when you were speaking to Andy about the consultation with councils, one of the key impacts to this whole programme, where it can fail spectacularly, is the length of time that councils take for planning permission. Will there be a consideration when you're looking at the clubs and the state of clubs and the state of pitches, that what level of planning permission is already perhaps granted and sitting there, or needs to be applied for, and the time implications on that?
Yeah, and that's another factor that will come through the OBC. We're very aware some clubs will have planning permission, some won't, and it's something we'll be very mindful of as we're working through this. We've had really positive engagement from the councils on this. You know, I think everybody's keen to see this roll out and see this work. So we will, of course, be mindful of that, yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all from me at this stage. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. And if you need to come in later, just let me know. Can we bring in Stephen, please?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Catherine and Nicola, for your presentation. And thanks to Nicola for recently meeting with me back in October with the local club in my constituency. Certainly, we're obviously keen to see progress. Just I know a couple of points have been mentioned already, but I suppose just a couple of thoughts and then a couple of questions. Obviously, there has been what could be termed a decade of delay on this very important fund. But just first of all, I'd like to ask you, are there any other reasons for this delay coming from the Minister?
No, Stephen, absolutely not. I mean, we're working through the processes here. There has been a delay. I appreciate the frustration of the clubs. There's been a number of factors in that delay, but the Minister's actively working to take this forward within this mandate now.
Okay, thank you. Just obviously a lot of members have asked written questions and so on, oral questions for quite a period of time, and you probably have been involved in answering some of those. I got one in August, you know, and the Minister said she is going to update executive colleagues in the coming weeks. That was on proposals for the way forward. That's now 4 months ago, you know, and there was real frustration, not just amongst us, but obviously right across the, you know, the football family. I suppose interest in local football, you know, it's never been higher from local clubs. And obviously, you've touched upon the international level both the men's and the women's, and through the disability programs. And football clubs really, they do have, they've waited very, very patiently, and I think the letter from NIFL that we received just this week, confirms that patience is now running very thin. Obviously, the clubs have spent considerable amount of money, in planning stages and so on to get preparations made. There's live planning applications, and I think most of them buy into the whole theme that they want to turn their grounds more into community hubs. And that certainly has come through from clubs I've been speaking to locally, and I'm sure it's come through from yourselves as well. But just back to the 36 million point, construction costs, from 10 years ago, have probably doubled at least. So, I really think that the Minister needs to do more in terms of getting additional budget to this, in recognition of the way the costs have went. Just in terms of the divisions of football, in terms of the Premier League, the Championship, the Intermediate Premiership and so on, what way is it envisaged that's going to work out for clubs in terms of eligibility at this stage?
So, the feedback has been very strong that the fund should address the full spectrum of football. So right down from the Premiership down to what the IFA call the everyday game. So we will need to look at how we shape the strands to ensure that there is investment across the piece. I mean, as you'd expect, different groupings reflect a preference for the funding to be slanted in slightly different directions, with maybe the higher level clubs supporting more support at the performance level. But there's obviously a need to invest in those grassroots clubs as well. So we will need to make sure that there's an equitable spread of the funding across the full spectrum of football.
Yeah, okay. Just in terms of back to the local councils then, have you engaged with all 11 councils in terms of their engagement and what level of it, are they willing to get involved in terms of match funding, obviously? Just an also thing on the requirements, the levels of funding, what percentage do you envisage is going to be towards total cost at this stage? So partnership funding has consistently been discussed as part of this programme, and in the original consultation it was sitting at 20%. And respondents largely felt that there should be partnership funding. The 20% level was subject to some debate. Recent engagement has shown that there's still support for partnership funding, with the belief that it shows a vested interest from the stakeholders, and also it's going to increase the available level of funding. It's the norm for there to be partnership funding in projects of this kind. Now, as we work through the OBC process, we'll start to look at what that partnership funding might look like. Post-COVID, some clubs are going to be more capable of raising that partnership funding than others. So we will need to take that into consideration. Similarly, councils may be better placed to provide a slightly higher level of partnership funding, but we'll need to work this through the OBC process. We have engaged with all 11 councils. There's engagements with each of them. And we continue to engage. In fact, Shirley and Nicola were at Derry City and Strabane just earlier this week. So, we do continue. There's an appetite of councils, I think, to work with us. We all know that we need to work together if we're going to deliver, and we deliver much better if we do work together. So, that process will continue as we work through the programme. Yeah, okay, thank you. Just final point, just going back to the 36 million, is the Minister actively pushing for more money, in recognition of the significant cost increases from that period? And also just final point in terms of, timeline for delivery. We're often reminded, every day within the Assembly now that the clock is ticking on the end of this mandate. We're now really classing it in weeks rather than months. So I suppose, is it realistic to have it by the end of this mandate? The more and more of this goes on, I think I'm certainly getting more doubtful of it, and I just don't see enough, I suppose, affirmative action from the Minister on this and urgency on it. I think we really do need to see urgency, and that's been hammered home from every club right across the country, and indeed the letter from NIFL, as I mentioned earlier. So I would just like a wee bit more clarity on that. Catherine, please. Thank you.
So I'll take the budget point first. So obviously the budget does remain at the 36.2. It will be for the executive if it's to be increased. Now, as we work through the OBC process, if it becomes clear that additional funding is needed, the Minister will obviously consider what actions need to be taken. In terms of this mandate, yeah, time is ticking down, as you say, but the Minister has committed to moving this forward within the mandate and committed to setting out the shape and the scope of the programme to your executive colleagues.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to hearing more from you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you. Stephen Kelly?
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Catherine. Stephen and Andy have both asked quite a lot of my questions, but I just want to tease out what Stephen was talking about then. I absolutely agree with you that there needs to be partnership working in this process, central and local government coming together. My concern is, so we know we're heading into a multi-year budget period for the departments. I expect money to be very tight. However, given the fact that councils are also, they're actually now doing their rate process for next year. So what I'm thinking about is how are we paralleling these processes so that we don't actually come up with a departmental scheme that cannot actually get match funding through councils because they have not pre-planned into their budget match funding capabilities for any of the sports. So I'm just wondering what work is being done to help that process so that if you do require 10 or 20% match funding, that councils are in a place and a position that they have capital funding built into their budget. So say, for instance, this comes out in September 2022, councils will have already been through 6 months of their budget and won't have anything there. How's that working?
So we have CLOA representation on the advisory working group. So, they're involved in each step of the way, I suppose, as we progress and as we consider and assess the implications. So it's really those conversations. Now, once the shape and scope of the programme is confirmed, we probably will need to have more focused conversations with the councils. And I would say that it's that ongoing communication that's going to hopefully pave the way to the collaborative working.
Okay. So are councils being asked at this stage to consider putting in X amount of capital to help with match funding?
There have been no specific asks in terms of funding because I suppose, Kelly, we don't know what the ask would be at the moment until we see what the programme looks like moving forward.
Okay, and just on that match funding, as I say, I have a number of clubs that are within my Strangford constituency who would fit into that rural category. They have been preparing for this programme to come forward. So they have, for instance, got architects' plans. They actually have planning permission. They're ready to go. They have such fantastic projects that they want to just be able to put down. They are, in effect, shovel ready. But I'm just wondering, as part of that match funding, will any of that pre-existing work be counted towards match funding? Or will they be required, and this is maybe long finger stuff, will they be required to go out and re-tender for the work that's already been done to bring it in scope? Any thoughts on that?
Actually, it's something we discussed at the last advisory working group, and we've committed to going away and taking a look at that because obviously where clubs have invested in their infrastructure, we don't want to in any way penalise them for doing that. So that's something we've already taken on board and we've committed to taking further look at that.
And just on that, I appreciate that there are councils that are in more urban areas and there are councils that are in rural areas. The rural clubs tend to be ones that have a wider scope, so if you've an urban area, it'll cover a particular part of an urban city. When you have rural areas, that one football club could be covering quite a wide range of the population in that council area. I'm just thinking, will there be any weighting provided to that, any consideration, of the rural proofing to that, and where clubs can provide that additional planning for health and well-being of the wider community, will that be considered as part of the process and the way forward? So,
the objectives of the programme are they're not just around the Stadia, they're around increasing inclusive participation, they're around the family and community orientated facilities. So whenever we establish the criteria, we'll be looking to tease out all these benefits and all these objectives. We'll obviously rural proof at the appropriate point. We'll also look, for example, at ground sharing, at collaboration. Many rural clubs will have strong links with other sports, with other communities, and all of that will be drawn in as we move forward. And we have worked closely with DAERA in terms of improving facilities at rural clubs, and we hope that will continue as we move forward.
Last thing just on this, when we're talking to those clubs, time has changed over the last 10 years, completely changed. The environment that we're talking about for funding has completely changed. There will be, I expect, a number of clubs that will be coming forward with floodlights, for instance. They would need to be able to use their pitches longer periods of time during the day. Environmental impacts, is there any consideration being made, for instance, to sustainable energy production? Anything we can do to help those clubs reduce their cost, like solar paneling for those lights or anything like that?
Absolutely, and environmental sustainability is coming through not just this programme but our strategy as well. We're already doing work in terms of floodlighting to have the more energy efficient floodlights. For all of these, it reduces running costs for the clubs moving forward as well. Climate change, a real focus for all of us, and so it has to be. So that will obviously be built into the criteria as well. We're very minded of those environmental considerations.
Okay. One of the things that I would like to ask for at this stage, and I know it's an ask because it's not been considered yet, we know through COVID that there was a huge amount of money was put out for sports, and thank goodness for it. But there was an issue about known liabilities and reserves, and we know that some clubs have been preparing for this. Can we ensure that as part of the application process that consideration is there that any club that has a reserve that has been saved up for this sub-regional stadia development for their club, that is required to be spent for that? And, if there's a way that we can ensure that that money that the communities have often raised is used for that purposes, but also those who haven't had the chance because COVID has wrecked their income, that there's something there to help those that don't have any reserves so that they're not excluded because others do have a reserve.
Yeah, and you're right, Kelly, there's the full spectrum. There are those clubs that have been preparing and have been able to hold on to their reserves, and there's those at the very bottom end of the spectrum. Now, the financial sustainability of the clubs will be considered within the criteria. We want to improve their sustainability, but equally we don't want to invest in projects that aren't going to be viable for the medium to long term. So we've already commissioned some work looking at what information already exists. For example, NIFL clubs have a mandatory licensing process, and whenever we're going through the criteria, we'll make sure that the financial viability and the additionality of funding will be interrogated through looking at the financial statements. And it would certainly not be our intent to disfavour any club that has been unduly impacted as a result of the pandemic.
No, that's brilliant, Catherine. It seems like you have it in hand. I just wish you were coming to us and saying, here's the application process, here we go, and by the way, the money's been considered up to 90 million, and that would be wonderful.
We're not asking for much. No,
Thank you.
That's grand. Kelly, I have Ciara waiting to come in. Ciara?
Thanks, Catherine and Nicola. I've just following on from Kelly in relation to state of readiness. Obviously, as Kelly had mentioned, she had a particular club there that has everything in place and they're in a state of readiness, and you would love all clubs who require assistance to be in that case, but obviously that'll not be the case for many clubs where they don't have that early investment to get, for the likes of your feasibility studies, your business case, your planning. That takes a lot of money, a lot of expertise and time that a lot of clubs don't have. So will there be, or has it been considered in relation to providing enabling support for clubs at the earlier stages?
Yeah, look, and Ciara, that's a really good point, because some clubs will have that knowledge within their membership and those skills within their membership, but other clubs won't, and some clubs will need additional support, for example, through Sport NI, through the department, and we'll obviously be mindful of that as we work through the process.
Okay, and just secondly, then I just want to come in, and obviously I understand the range of obviously key criteria that you are considering, which is critical and important, particularly around inclusion and around disability, regarding urban and rural. And with regards to particularly one big one for me is obviously areas of disadvantage is obviously key, but also ensuring accessibility. So I'm kind of key, and obviously I know you've mentioned you've worked with all councils. Has there been a clear assessment of need regarding accessibility across the north in relation to particular councils and particularly areas of disadvantage?
Yeah, and I mean that came through quite strongly in the consultation that people felt that areas of social deprivation should get more assistance. We're looking at how we address that regional spread piece. So we're doing a bit of mapping and football facilities at the moment. The advisory working group was very supportive of this work. Participation in football does vary across the different council areas, but it's very clear that there's a need for a sub-regional spread across all council areas, and that's something we will look to obtain through the process.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Ciara, Andy, did you want to come back on something there?
Yeah, just a quick supplementary. Just to clarify quickly, by the time we go through the various remaining processes, it's likely it's going to be beyond the time in which the budget is agreed. So will it be? It'll be left to monitoring rounds to secure any uplift if any is required.
Yeah, the intention would be that we would bid in the appropriate monitoring rounds as and when funding is required, and that would be fairly normal process for programmes of this size. Obviously, the timing is paramount here, so we need to make sure we're getting the funding in the year in which we need it. We anticipate that any funding will be ring fenced, so we would just bid to the monitoring rounds as and when we need the funding.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Okay, folks.
Chair,
Ciara, Ciara, did you want to come in again there? Go ahead, Ciara.
There's been some consideration in relation to, I know you mentioned the match funding, with regard to the threshold of what you can apply up to under each of the 5 areas. Is that as a big consideration, or can you inform us or enlighten us in relation to that?
So, at the moment, I suppose the Minister's considering what the various strands might look like, and you're right, there will be different needs from a small rural club, maybe as opposed to one of the Premiership clubs. So there will need to be strands of some sort to ensure that we target the interventions with the right areas at the right levels.
Okay. Is that all right, Ciara?
Yeah. Okay.
Right,
Thank
members, I'm just very conscious of time as well here. Can I thank Nicola and Catherine very much for briefing us here today. I think our takeaway from this most definitely is that we write to the Department and the Minister for a more definitive, as Andy put it, timeline, because the committee actually now is really at the end of the road with us. We're extremely frustrated. We want something. We actually want a definitive timeline. Yeah. We want a strategy of how it's going to be paid for. I think that certainly any club listening to this today will not find any comfort in this briefing at all going forward, especially around the finance of it. Our committee is very responsive to anything the department asks us to do, anything they ask us to look at, scrutinise, whatever that might be. So I am just now asking, as a committee, that we get given afforded the same respect, I suppose, to have this information in writing to us as soon as possible. Would members agree with that?
Agree.
Yeah. Okay. Look, thank you, folks. Thank you for being with us, and we'll speak to you again. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
All right, members. Are we happy to move on from that, Kelly?
I don't know whether this is appropriate or possible, but can we write to SIB to ask what bids that they are considering or money that they're looking for this?
We can ask, and if it's not appropriate, we'll be told it's not appropriate. So, yeah, I'm happy enough. We can ask. Yeah, I think enough is enough on this, to be perfectly honest. Okay, members, can we move on? Right. I just wanted to say to you before we move on, Jonathan from our committee team has sent through Eleanor's PowerPoint to us, so you'll find that in your emails. All right, folks, we've got an urgent LCM, 2 SRs, and then our usual end of business in 45 minutes tops. So let's be as succinct as possible. So we've now got a departmental briefing on LCM, the pension scheme conversion of guaranteed minimum pensions bill 2021. The Department has requested that we urgently consider this LCM at our meeting today to ensure that the necessary timescales are met. We requested a briefing as we will have to produce a committee report on this LCM, and we will want the opportunity today to have the need for the LCM explained and to ask any questions if there are any. So can I welcome Anne McCleary, Doreen Roy and Richard Jordan to the meeting, please?
Yeah.
There we are. There's Anne. How are you?
Oh, yeah. Hello, can I just check that you can hear me after the last episode? I always feel the need to check.
Yes, Anne, we can hear you loud and clear.
That's fine.
Is Doreen with you as well?
Okay, good.
Yes, I'm here and Richard here as well.
Good. We haven't been speaking to you, Doreen, in a wee while as well, so it's good to have you back with us. So, Anne, is it your...
I can see everybody, so that's good.
Okay, good. Thank you, Doreen. And is it yourself that's going to brief us?
Yes.
Can you go ahead?
I'll start.
Brilliant.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. As you've seen, I've got Doreen and Richard here on the phones who will be able to deal with any questions that you've got if I can't deal with it. But however, we're very pleased to have the opportunity to speak to you today about the pension schemes conversion of guaranteed minimum pensions bill. We'll just call that GMP from this point on. And in particular, the proposed legislative consent motion. We've provided the committee with fairly comprehensive written briefing on the bill, including a draft of the legislative consent motion. Now, I'm going to cover the technical context first and then go into a bit more of the technical detail and then a bit more on the broader side of things. The primary legislation which makes provision for the GMPs is the Pension Schemes Northern Ireland Act 1993. Although the GMP rules were abolished for contracted out service after the 5th of April 1997, past accruals remain subject to that. The Pensions Act Northern Ireland 2008 amended the 1993 Act to introduce provisions enabling schemes to convert members' GMP rights to rights to other scheme benefits. And the intention was to enable a scheme to adopt a unified and streamlined benefit structure, subject to certain safeguards to protect members' interests. Now, if the committee are content, I'll briefly run through the main provisions of the bill. In summary, Clause 2.2 to 9 amends the Pension Schemes Northern Ireland Act 1993. Clause 2.2 amends the definition of GMP conversion to clarify that it applies to the conversion of GMP benefits due to either the earner who was alive immediately before the conversion date or a person who immediately before the conversion date was the widow, widower or surviving civil partner of the earner. It also includes consequential amendments. Clause 2.3a makes a technical amendment to ensure that any money purchase benefits accrued as part of the pension benefits are not included in the actuarial calculation to convert GMP benefits into other benefits. Clause 2.3c and 2.4 remove the detailed requirements in Section 20D of the 1993 Act regarding survivors' benefits that must be provided by a converted scheme, and instead provides a power to prescribe in regulations the conditions which must be met in relation to survivors' benefits that must be provided by a converted scheme. Clause 2.5 amends Section 20E of the 1993 Act. Section 20E requires that the consent of the employer in relation to a scheme must be obtained before the scheme can undertake the GMP conversion process. The amendment replaces this requirement with a power to prescribe in regulations conditions that must be met by a person, if any, who must consent before conversion can take place. Clause 2.5 also removes the requirement in Section 20E for HMRC to be notified of a conversion. The amendments in Clause 2.6 to 2.9 provide for further consequential amendments to the 1993 Act. Clause 2.10 amends Section 12 of the Pensions Act Northern Ireland 2008, that's conversion of guaranteed minimum pensions, in consequence of the amendments that I've just referred to. The DWP Minister for Pensions and Financial Inclusion has asked the Minister for Communities to agree that the provisions in Clause 2, which I've just described, of the bill, extend here and to bring forward the necessary legislative consent motion. At this point, I want to stress that our normal starting point would be to try to avoid using the LCM process where possible. We're very conscious of the views of members of the committee on the use. However, given the circumstances, the Minister has taken the view that on balance it seems sensible to seek an LCM. And if I can now just go on to explain why we're seeking an LCM. As you're well aware, pensions is a devolved matter. In general, pensions policy and legislation here operate in line with corresponding provisions in England, Scotland and Wales, in line with Section 87 of the Northern Ireland Act 1998. Private pensions are subject to, I think what we'd all agree, is a somewhat complex web of tax law, which is an accepted matter, financial services law, which is a reserved matter, and general pensions law, which is a devolved matter. Given the nature of the private pension sector, many pension schemes, and in fact most bodies in this area, such as the Pensions Regulator, the Pensions Ombudsman, the Pension Protection Fund and the Fraud Compensation Fund, operate across the jurisdictions. Members will be aware that the guaranteed minimum pension is the minimum pension that a pension scheme that was contracted out of the annual state pension between the 6th of April 78 and the 5th of April 97 has to provide to its members. GMPs that accrue to individuals contracted out between these dates create inequalities between men and women in the overall pensions that they receive. Now, this is largely due to the fact that during this period, state pension ages for men and women were different, leading to different accrual rates and different ages from which GMPs were payable. To give you an example, a woman's GMP accrues at a greater rate than that of a man. Recognition that at the time, a woman's working life for state pension purposes was 5 years shorter than that of a man. As a result, where a woman and a man have an identical work history, the woman's overall GMP will be greater than that of the man. The woman is also entitled to receive her GMP at an earlier age, age 60, than a man is entitled to receive his, age 65, creating further differences between GMPs payable to men and women. This is a result of indexation and revaluation requirements. The requirement that GMPs are increased annually to protect the value of a member's pension from being eroded by the effects of inflation. When in payment, indexation, or if the member has not yet retired but is no longer an active member of the scheme, that's revaluation. Indexation and revaluation rates are different. Because their GMP ages differ, a woman will be entitled to indexation on a GMP in payment in periods during which a man of the same age is entitled to revaluation on a GMP that has not yet been put into payment. As a result of different rates of indexation or revaluation applying at different times, a woman's GMP will typically start out as higher than that for a comparable man. But the value of the man's GMP may overtake that of the woman. I know complex doesn't start to describe this. These differences create inequalities. That's the key thing here. The differences create inequalities in the amount of pension income received by both men and women who have GMPs, depending on the individual's ages and circumstances. Now we've got the court come into it. Following the European Court of Justice's decision in Barber, 1990, the position has been that schemes are required to equalise overall pensions for the effect of inequalities caused by GMPs, and that position was endorsed by the Lloyds Bank High Court ruling in October 2018. The provisions in the bill address concerns that the operation of certain provisions of the conversion legislation are unclear and should be amended to make it easier to use. The changes aim to help reassure pension schemes that they can use the conversion legislation to equalise overall pensions for the effective differences between men and women resulting from GMPs. So really, in summary, the measures in the bill aim to, firstly, clarify that the legislation applies to survivors as well as earners. Secondly, provide for a power to set out in regulations the conditions that must be met in relation to survivors' benefits. Thirdly, provide for a power to set out in regulations detail about who must consent to the conversion. And fourthly, and finally, to remove the requirement to notify HMRC. As I said at the outset, we understand concerns about the use of the LCM process, but it's important to note that under this bill, the power to make subordinate legislation and to commence the Northern Ireland provisions will vest in the Department for Communities. Likewise, the powers of control over the subordinate legislation will vest in the Assembly. The proposed changes aim to help reassure pension schemes that they can use the conversion legislation to equalise overall pensions for the effective differences between men and women resulting from GMPs. If it's not agreed that provisions in this bill extend here, it will be necessary for us to bring forward a separate Assembly bill so that we could ensure equal treatment across the jurisdictions and to provide clarity around the GMP conversion legislation. However, it would be unlikely that any Assembly bill could complete its passage before 2023. If it's agreed that provisions in the bill extend here, this allows the provisions to be enacted across the jurisdictions at the same time. This provides legal certainty for schemes so that they can equalise overall pensions for the effective differences between men and women resulting from GMPs. The intention is that the bill should be enacted as soon as possible. It would therefore be beneficial, time-wise, and to remove the current lack of legal clarity, which remains a barrier to schemes' use of the conversion legislation, to agree that the provisions extend here. We were anxious to ensure that the committee was advised of this issue as soon as possible, and subject to executive approval, the LCM will be laid as a matter of urgency. Now, we're happy to answer any questions or clarify any issues that you have.
Thank you, Anne, and I think I can say on behalf of all of the committee the last thing we want is another bill, especially a highly technical pensions bill.
A highly technical pensions bill is not really what you want to be focusing on.
Absolutely not. I just have a couple of points, and one of them has been passed through by my clerk, and she had said that Clause 210 amends Section 12. You had said, but your paper says it amends Section 14. So just for clarity on that, is it okay. Section 12 or 14? That might have just been a slip of the tongue on your part because there was that much there, Anne. Or not, so if we just get clarity
I'll ask Doreen and Richard to.
You can just send us. You can send us through clarity on that. That is not a problem.
Okay, right, yeah.
And then just the other issue I wanted to ask you then was just the lateness of it coming to us. Is that due to DWP or is it due to requiring clearance from the minister? Just that's all really. That's all I want to add or ask.
Okay, I think Doreen may be able to answer that.
Right, in relation to the 2008 Act, the bill amends Section 12, so I can confirm that. I'm looking at the bill at the moment, so it is Section 12.
Okay, that's great. That's good because I think it doesn't. It says 14 in your paper, so that's okay. Yep, and then.
Apologies for that.
No problem. That just showed you how closely our committee clerk is reading all of this. And then also just about the lateness and why we're getting it and why it has to be rushed through. Just a quick answer on that would be good.
Right. Well, a print of the proposals in the bill was not available until October. So we moved as quickly as possible then to come to yourselves and start the process once the Minister had agreed for us to do that. So I hope that helps explain the what's perceived as a timeline.
No, that does explain that. So you got it in October, so it was just waiting then for the Minister to declare it, I suppose, before it came to us. Okay.
Yes, and the second reading of the bill in Parliament was on the 26th of November, so that's just passed.
Okay.
And we now know that the bill has government support because it was subject to a ballot. So it would not really have been feasible to get to you any earlier than we have.
No, that's fair enough. Like, thank you, Doreen. Anybody, anything quickly that they want to add? Go ahead, Kelly.
I'll declare an interest because I think I'm one of them people that my company pension scheme had me opted out. So I think I'm one of those people that has a pension scheme somewhere. But I just want to check, guys. This is a melter, to be honest. I'll be very honest with this technical stuff. But we're all very aware that WASPI, you know, the Women Against State Pension changes, have been concerned about changes to state pension. Does this do anything to address their concerns? I know it talks about balancing out men and women, which, of course, if we don't want inequality, so quite happy with that one. But is there anything that can help with those WASPI women?
I think the short answer is this is not related to that. This is a totally different issue.
Okay.
Yes, this deals with existing conversion provisions in the 1993 Act. So the provisions are already in place. This bill simply aims to clarify those provisions because there is perceived uncertainty about, for example, how the guidance for the methodology for pension schemes to use to equalise, it's in order to address those concerns because some pension schemes are nervous and concerned about not, without realising it, not taking the right action and then leaving themselves open to legal challenge.
Okay. My final question on this is, something was said that it sets off alarm bells for me. That was it any future? Sorry, Anne, just keep me right on this. Any future changes can be through subordinate legislation and would be the responsibility of the Department for Communities and the Assembly. What implications will that have for us if we diverge from Westminster?
Doreen, can you?
As ever, whenever we bring forward regulations to the committee, they will be in proposal form, and then it's up to the committee to determine whether they agree with those regulations or not. Having said that, as you know, in line with Section 87 of the Northern Ireland Act 1998, there is in effect a single system of pensions across all of the jurisdictions. So to allow for the smooth running of pension schemes, I don't think the added complexity would actually help any situation.
Okay, now I always get worried, why do they want us to take on those subordinate regulations? If we do make any difference, then that knocks us outside of that, centralised pension scheme. But no, that's me, thank you.
Well, yeah, it's a devolved area, so, that's why we bring all of the pensions regulations to yourselves.
Okay.
Okay, look, thank you, Kelly, thank you. Nobody else has indicated they want to ask anything. So, Anne, Doreen and Richard, thank you very much for briefing the committee today. And just say, Doreen, it was good to hear your voice again. So it was, haven't heard you in a while. Thank you so much. Okay, folks, thank you.
That's great. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Anne. Okay, members, we've now down to like 20 minutes and we have 6 items still to get through, so let's push on. Agenda item 10 then is SR 2021-302, the Universal Credit Work Alliance and Taper Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2021. You'll find a copy of the rule at page 526. Let me just check we still have a quorum. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just to ask Ciara, we have Stephen, Ciara and Aisling, if you can please stay on Don't be leaving us yet, because we need you for a quorum. So, sorry. Members, you'll find a copy of this rule at page 526 of your meeting pack. Can I then ask, have members any objections to the rule?
No.
No objections? Then I'll put the following. That the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2021-302, the Universal Credit Work Allowance and Taper Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2021, and subject to the Examiner of Statutory Rules report, has no objections to the rule. Moving on then to agenda item 11, which is SR 2021-303, the Universal Credit Exception to the requirement not to be receiving Education Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2021. You'll find a copy of this rule at page 533. Again, can I ask, do members have any objections to this rule?
No. Good idea.
No objections. Thank you. Then I'll put the following, that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2021-303, the Universal Credit Exception to the requirement not to be receiving Education Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2021, and subject to the Examiner of Statutory Rules report, has no objections to the rule. Moving on then to agenda item 12, which is correspondence. You'll find the correspondence memo at page 542 of your pack. Can I draw your attention to page 603, which is a memo from the Committee and Members' Support Office in relation to personal security session on the 15th of December 2021. Members, if you wish to attend this session, please reply as outlined in the memo. Also draw your attention to page 605 is a request from the Northern Ireland On-Course Bookmakers Association to brief the Committee on the Betting, Gaming, Lotteries and Amusement Amendment Bill. Last week we seem to have reached our limit on briefing slots, but a cancellation has become available since then. Are members content that we have this group come in to brief committee?
Agreed.
Agreed? Okay. Brilliant, thank you. Any members want to bring anything else up that is in the correspondence memo?
No.
Okay, no, then can we agree that then? Yes?
Agreed. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Moving on then to agenda item 13, which is Forward Work Programme. Just to advise that our meeting on the 9th of December, we will continue our deliberations on the Private Tenancies Bill. We will also be taking the postponed fuel poverty payments briefing. So that is our meeting next Thursday. Okay, members, agenda item 14 is any other business. Can I ask if members any other business they want to highlight?
No.
Just one item, Chair.
Go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, just briefly, a bit more for Janice. Last week I met with Catherine Thompson, the Chief of the Ulster Folk and Transport Museum, who I'm sure you'll know well, and understand she had written to the committee and she'd be keen to invite us down, obviously possibly for a meeting, but certainly look around at a number of new exhibitions around NI 100 and innovation and so on, which is very good. I'm sure would make it a worthwhile visit, and she would happily host the meeting, host our committee meeting within the facilities there. But just wanted to mention that. I don't know whether it's something we can do. I know we've a lot on our plates and time is taken, but perhaps we could check that one out.
Yeah, we can check it out again, Stephen. Under normal circumstances, we would be out doing visits all around the place, so we would. We know that the implications of COVID have put extra burden on committees. I know that through being in the chairperson's liaison group, and how that puts an onus on committees. It's not the venue or the operator of the venue. It's the committee clerks that are liable under any of that, so that causes us a problem too. But also the fact that there's no issue. Bills have to be hand-sorted, so when we're looking at bills, it's easier for our people here in Hansard to be able to hear us more distinctly when we're in this building rather than outside this building, so that gives a few problems too. Though I'll say we can look at it again. I would love to be out doing committee visits or our briefings, because we can do it. We've done it in the past, all of us have done it, and it's great to be out there doing those things across the country. So I know it's also your constituency as well, and it's part of our remit, absolutely, and part of our brief. But we'll look at it again, and we'll just look at the complexities around it. And if it's doable, then we'll do it. If it becomes very complex because of COVID regulations and the Hansard, they would be my two main issues. But we'll take a look, Stephen.
Stephen, I think it's an excellent idea. I would
all those points, and Catherine obviously had mentioned it, promised her I would raise it anyway, certainly. So,
Stephen, I think that's an excellent idea. I would love to see the chair, the deputy chair, and all the staff of this committee having a go on a penny farthing.
There you go. Yeah, that's not going to happen. I can assure you.
Okay.
Sorry, we did, whenever that letter or the request came in, we did agree to revisit it in the new year once we'd got through the bulk of the bills.
Brilliant. Well, that's okay. We will revisit
That
it.
is on the record that we agreed.
No, that's grand. No problem. Thanks for bringing that up, Stephen. Okay, I'm going to move on. If there's no other business, I'm moving on then. Yep, going. We're going to agenda item 15, which is date, time and location of our next meeting. Just to advise you that our next meeting will take place on Tuesday, the 7th of December 2021 at 9 a.m. in room 30, when we'll be hearing from the GAA, the IFA and the Northern Ireland Sports Forum on the betting and gambling bill. So thank you very much, members, for your attendance today, and I'll see you on Tuesday.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 20.